Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who is audio or video recording? Thank you. Mr. Kent, thank you. Anyone further? Seeing and hearing none. Selectmen's comments. Mr. Ward.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Salter.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Mrs. Lapointe.
Nothing, thank you.
And Mrs. Anderson.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, I do have one I'd like to mention. Tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. we have a ribbon cutting for a new business in town. It's been a while since we've had one, so it's going to be great to be able to get back into honoring those new businesses. It's going to be at Stephanie Simon's Yoga. She's opening a studio adjacent to the bowling alley at 5 Summer Street, and that is tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Bless you. So if you could join us there to welcome her to town, that would be fantastic. And that is the only comment I have. Is there any public comments or announcements this evening? And I see and hear none. Thank you. We do have a public hearing this evening from National Grid. Mr. Ward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Town of Winchendon, June 14, 2021. In conformity with the requirements of Section 22 of Chapter 166 of the General Laws, you are hereby notified that a public hearing is scheduled to be held by the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Winchendon, Mass. on the 28th day of June at 6:30 p.m. in the second-floor auditorium of the Winchendon Town Hall, 109 Front Street, upon the petition of National Grid requesting permission it desires to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting features along and across the following public way. Hall Road. National Grid to install 3 single-owned poles on Hall Road, beginning at a point approximately 230 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Spring Street and Hall Road, and continuing approximately 300 feet in a west direction. Installing new 40-foot C2, P33, P34, and P35. Installing push brace on P31 for new teacher housing in at the Winchendon School. Location approximately as shown on plan attached. Wherefore it prays that after due notice and hearing as provided by law, it be granted a location for and permission to erect and maintain poles and wires, together with such sustaining and protecting fixtures as it may find necessary. Said poles to be erected substantially in accordance with the plan filed herewith, marked Hall Road, Winchendon, Massachusetts. Plan number 303384441, dated June 1st, 2021, and attached herewith. Also for permission to lay and maintain underground laterals, cables, and wires in the above or intersecting public ways for the purpose of making connections with such poles and buildings as each of said petitioners may desire for distributing purposes. Your petitioner agrees to reserve space for 1 cross arm at a suitable point on each of said poles for the fire, police, telephone, and telegraph signal wires belonging to the municipality and used by it exclusively for municipal purposes. Any comments, questions, or concerns can be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen prior to the meeting by mailing the Selectmen at 109 Front Street, Department 1, Winchendon, Mass. 01475, by email at ttower@townofwinchendon.com, or by calling the office at 978-297-0085. Signed, Taylor C. Tower, Taylor Tower, Administrative Assistant for the Winchendon Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Do I have a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to open the poll petition public hearing for Hall Road. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Was that an aye, Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there someone from National Grid here this evening? Please. Good evening.
Good evening.
If you would please to the mic and introduce yourself.
Rebecca Marks, National Grid.
Yeah,
No, sorry.
that's fine. It's for the recording.
Rebecca Marks, National Grid.
Okay?
I don't know if this, do I have to push it or it works? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, a little bit closer. There we
All
go.
right.
Yeah.
Rebecca Marks, National Grid.
Okay.
We just want to put 3 poles on Hall Road to feed the new housing for Winchendon School. That
Yep.
they're
Pretty straightforward. How many houses are going to be going in? Do you know?
I believe there's 3. So
There was
they're starting with the very last house, so we have to put the 3 poles in order to start at the last house.
Okay.
I believe there will be 2 like a subdivision house, 2 in each house, so it'll approximately 6 houses.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Lapointe? Oh, okay, thank you. I do see in our paperwork that the abutters were notified of the meeting this evening. Are there any abutters here this evening who would like to speak to the issue? Seeing and hearing none, all right. If there are no further questions from the board, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I
Ward,
move to close the poll petition public hearing for Hall Road.
do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor to close the petition, the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Was that an aye, Mrs. Salter?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else on the petition? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the poll petition for 3 single-owned poles on Hall Road as presented this evening.
Second.
thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the petition. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair will vote aye. Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You're welcome. All right, moving on to appointments and resignations. First up for us this evening, we have an appointment to the Recreation Commission. Tiffany Newton.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Daigle.
Tiffany reached out to us earlier today and said that she wasn't able to attend the meeting.
All right, thank you very much. She is requesting to serve on the Recreation Commission, and from what I understand, the commission would welcome her. We have an email from Laura. If there's no discussion, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward.
I move to approve the appointment of Tiffany Newton to the Recreation Commission with an expiration date of 6/30/2024.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to approve the appointment. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And thank you very much, Ms. Newton, for stepping forward. Next up, we have a couple of additional appointment renewals. As you recall, a week or two ago, we went through our whole list of the annual renewals, and we have 2 additional folks who wish to be reappointed to serve another 3-year term for our consideration this evening. For the Cultural Council, Linda Hoffog. Is she here this evening? No. Okay.
And Jane.
And we have James McCrohan to the Historical Commission, Historic District. And I don't see him. These are both reappointments, correct?
Yes,
Mrs.
ma'am.
Daigle? Yes. Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Okay. I will then entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I
Ward.
move to approve the reappointment of Linda Hoffberg to the Cultural Council and James McCrohan to the Historical Commission Historic District for another term.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair will vote aye. And thank you again for stepping forward. Next, we have a resignation. Tina Santos is resigning from the Winchendon Cultural Council. She was recently elected to the Winchendon Board of Health. So we have in our packet the correspondence that she sent to Jill. Any discussion, questions, or comments? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to accept the resignation of Tina Santos for the Cultural Council and thank her for her service.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to accept the resignation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair will vote aye. And I know that she would have loved to stay on the Cultural Council, but with a position on the Board of Health, There's certain requirements of the Massachusetts State Cultural Council that requires her to do one or the other, so. All right. Next up, we have Board of Selectmen, our annual list, not annual, because we go through this fairly often. There is a series of vacancies that we are looking for people to step forward to fill for us, and I'll just briefly run down what those vacancies are. As of the 24th, the Communications Committee, we have one vacancy. They work regarding the local access programming and communications with the residents of the community. Cultural Council, we have 7 vacancies. They promote cultural experiences for citizens. They do a lot of activities in the town. We have a field viewer fence driver, one vacancy. The field viewer administers the fence laws, and the field driver makes sure that no person shall pasture any cattle, goat, or other animal upon any street or public way, et cetera, except within certain limits. Who else do we have? We have the Historical Commission. There is one alternate vacancy. The Master Plan Implementation Committee, looking for 7 vacancies. This is a newly formed committee. As you've been aware of, we've been working on the master plan, and the committee is charged with working on getting it in gear and the execution of what's outlined in the master plan. And then we have an Open Space Preservation Appraisal and/or Survey Revolving Fund Advisory Committee, one vacancy, to help assist landowners who want to preserve their land from development. Recreation Commission, we have one student vacancy. Toy Town Community Partnership, we have 4 vacancies. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have 2 alternate vacancies. So if any of those you'd be interested in getting more information on, or would like to submit your name, submit a letter of interest to the Board of Selectmen, care of 109 Front Street, Department 1. And I think there is also an online form on the townofwindsor.com. If you go look on the Board of Selectmen page, you may find a link to the online application. And a big thank you to those who do step forward and help fill these vacancies. All right, next up, permit license applications. It has been a long time since we've had any of these. So this is really great to see. First up, we have Max Performance, 15th Annual Massachusetts State Triathlon, Sunday, July 11th, 2021. Good evening.
Hi there. Good evening, folks. It's nice to see everyone.
Yes, for the record, your name?
Tim Richmond with Max Performance.
Thank you. So you weathered the storm of 2020?
We have. We've turned the corner here.
Yes.
So we're excited to be back. Just so I'd be happy to talk a little bit about the event, if that's okay.
Do.
Sunday, we're coming up close here, and I do apologize for the kind of last-minute nature. The endurance sports industry was kind of the last to even get notified of any kind of springtime reopening. So here we are. The race is coming up Sunday, July 11th. We're welcoming in probably around 350 to 400 athletes to Lake Denison. And we're excited to showcase everything that the towns has to offer. For folks that are watching at home that might not have checked out the triathlon before, this is our 15th iteration of the triathlon at the state park. And we'll have folks swimming, biking, and running in that order. You can visit us online at maxperformanceonline.com. And we work with several groups in the community. We would like to thank them for their support, namely some folks at Winchendon, the cross-country team at the high school, as well as the student council, some folks in Gardner that have helped us out as well. And I want to make sure I don't leave anybody else out. But there's also a lot of local volunteers that come out and help support the event. So we do appreciate it. And And today, we're simply asking for road use permit for access to some of the town roads. And then the second part of that, which might be a separate component, is the 1 day or 1.5 day liquor license over at the state park.
Oh, thank you very much. Questions or comments from board members?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, this is a good public relations event for the town to let everyone know all the recreational opportunities that we have in Winchendon. And I'm glad that you're involved with local groups, you know, the Bull Spit Brewery, which will be coming into town. I just have two questions. How long is the road race? What's the distance on that?
So the swim is about a mile. It's an Olympic distance, so it's 0.9 miles, which is 1.5 kilometers in the swim. And then the bike course is going to be 22 miles, and then the run is 6 miles. So it's not the shortest of triathlons. It's certainly not the longest, but it's still pretty chunky for a lot of athletes to try to get through. Most of our competitors finish around 3 hours, with the top athletes coming in just over 2 hours.
And is that road race going to be along a portion of the course of the bike race?
The running portion?
Yeah, the running.
The running portion is through the state park, so they don't overlap.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't overlap.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything further from the board? Mrs. Anderson?
I do have a question. Do we charge them a fee for the permit?
Yeah. Yes.
Could we
I-
waive that fee since they do support local clubs and charities?
That is
Certainly, it's your prerogative.
certainly a motion that could be put before the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I move to approve the road race permit for Max Performance to be held on Sunday, July 11th, 2021, as presented this evening, and to waive the permit fee.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the request and waive the fee. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And then we also have before us this evening, for Tim, they are requesting 2 one-day liquor licenses for July 10th and 11th to have an enclosed area to distribute beer at the conclusion of the race to participants as part of the entry fee. It's not no, people just can't walk in and buy beer. It is just for the participants. Time frame distribution is 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Sunday. Police detail, etc. They need, even though the event is only 1 day that they will be distributing the beer, the second one-day license allows them the permit to have the beer on premise in preparation for the event and also to clean up after the event. Anything you'd like to add, or?
No, the only, the important note, and I know Jim Hunt from Bull Spit is behind me as I speak. We've been in close contact with Bull Spit. They have, because they are so busy, they've deferred to Moon Hill Brewing, which is in Phillipston. And so many folks know of Moon Hill, and they've been around for 15 years as well. So they are stepping in because Bull Spit, and I'll let Jim speak to it a little bit, but they've been just so busy and inundated with the new projects here in Winchendon that it's a smart move to just to defer to their friends, and the craft beer industry is a close-knit community. So
Absolutely.
that's the only change. But all the other outlines ring true as far as the tip certified servers and everyone being educated and understanding of the event.
Very good, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I move to approve 2 special one-day malt licenses for Max Performance's 15th Annual Mass State Triathlon on Saturday, July 10th, and Sunday, July 11th, 2021, as presented this evening.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to approve the licenses as discussed. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say...
Madam Chair?
Oh, I beg your pardon, Mrs. Daigle.
There is a fee for this also. If you'd like to waive the $30 fee, you could include it in your motion.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would like to say, especially, they're not selling them, they give the beer to the participants, so I think it would be appropriate.
Well, thank you.
As the maker of the motion, Mr. Ward?
I'll amend it to waive the fee.
Thank you. And the seconder of the motion?
Second.
Is fine with that? Okay, thank you. So the motion before us is to approve the license and waive the fee. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye,
Aye.
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you so much, and
Thank
welcome
you,
back to town.
members of the board. It's wonderful to see you all again. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Next up, we have an entertainment permit for the summer concert series, the Winchton Recreation Commission. Is there someone here this evening to speak regarding that? Good evening.
Hello, I'm Deborah Bradley, and we were trying to set up the
I'm
band
sorry, you need
concerts
to get a
again.
little bit closer to the mic. Yeah, just pull it forward.
Yeah, I'm Deborah Bradley. I'm one of the members on the Recreation Commission, and we have been working the last few weeks to get this all straightened out and see who we can get booked up. And we are looking to see if we can start this Friday, July 2nd, with a band and get our permits going so we can do them every Friday again until the end of August.
Very nice. It's good to have this back before us this evening. Questions or comments from the board?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
could I just say, I'm so happy that you guys are starting that back up. I'm
Yeah.
very excited. I love going down there.
Yeah, it's
Every
nice to
week.
hear the music through the town, too.
It's just so great, and I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Chair? I
Mr.
would
Ward?
just like to concur because this is the favorite event for me of the summer. And I love sitting down there on a Friday night, especially if you have oldies and country music. I'm a
Yes.
fan. But I
Yes,
sit
yes.
through rock and roll, whatever. I just like being there. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
Do you know if the permit for the portable toilet has that been arranged yet with Scotty?
Yes, it's been submitted. I'm not sure the actual status of it right now, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from the board? I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair?
Mr.
I
Ward?
move to approve the entertainment permit for the Recreation Commission for their summer concert series as presented this evening.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to approve the entertainment permit. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Get there.
And next up, we have entertainment permit, Damien Stock concert at the Snowbound Club. How are you?
Good evening. I'm Dean Sweeney, representing the Snowbound Club. Oops, I just lost my thing. We
All
look
right.
to hold a benefit with Lindsay Kucha, who is renting... Kucha? Kaja?
Kuchta. Kuchta.
It's for Damien Stock. I guess that's her brother. It's going to be a celebration of life of Damien Kucha, and also to raise money and awareness for addiction in his memory. So we look to have that July 17th at the Snowbound Club, running from 4 p.m. to about 10 p.m. with 2 bands.
All right, thank you. I noticed that the service of alcohol beverages outdoor permitted through the state of emergency has been extended, so you are covered under that
Yes.
extension, so you do not need a special permit for that. Okay. They have a food service permit. So, any questions or comments from the board? No. Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
I move to approve the entertainment permit for the Snowbound Club to hold the Damien Stock concert on July 17, 2021, as presented this evening.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to approve the permit. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Aye, Mrs. Salter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Good luck.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you. Okay, we have one more. We're going to be busy around town the next few months. This is fantastic. Kalon Farms, a special one-day beer and wine liquor license, Kalon Farm Pop-Up Boatyard. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank you for allowing me here tonight.
Certainly. What do you have up your sleeve?
So we are looking to do a pop-up, we're calling it Boatyard, because the brewery is a subsidiary of Kalon Farm, right on 270 Central Street, which is Ty Matthews' plot of land. And we've talked with Ty, and we've come up with a private agreement for use of the land. And kind of a unique situation, but we're looking to get a series of one-day liquor license for beer and wine, and we would be operating on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays through the duration of the summer, or for 2 months to start. And then we would approach the board again at the end of August to see if we could continue on through September and October.
Very good. October 4. There is a note regarding the number of one-day liquor licenses that the ABCC restricts towns to issue. So through July and August, for the 3 days each, that would be 23 one-day licenses. And we can issue up to 30 total in a calendar year. So we just issued one for for the road race. Mrs. Daigle?
The 30 days is per person business. The license is issued to an individual who can act on behalf of another business, but it's 30 per application.
Oh, I apologize.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for
You're welcome.
clarifying that for me. Okay.
So one of the things, because there is that 30-day, one of the things we're looking is if we do have to close because of rain, we don't open that day, because we are limited to that 30, we were hoping to push that license to a later date, so on and so forth. 'Cause I think in total, there's 39 days that we're looking. So we would have to reapply at some point if we had beautiful weather at some point to get us through those 9 additional days. And, we would do that under one of our other businesses and with a different manager and such. But that's just one of the caveats we're looking at, is to see if that would be possible to transfer those days if we don't use it due to weather.
Okay. What else is going to be going on there? You going to have food trucks or?
So initially, we were going to do a food truck, but then after a conversation with Beth at Not Just Produce, I think she was getting ready to start up doing barbecue to go on the weekends. So we thought it would be a nice fit to partner with her. We also spoke with the Gabbies right across the street, and they were kind of excited about the idea, and, we're going to partner with them with food, have their menus, so there'll be to-go numbers on all the tables. People can call, order, then go to their respective spots, get food, and bring it back. So it's going to be a good way to integrate the whole community into what we're doing.
Yeah, and a hometown cafe is right there as well.
Hometown Cafe
so,
is there,
yeah.
yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay.
Our goal is to try to get everybody on the Central Street. We were just working kind of in that immediate area to begin with.
Very good. You'll be providing liquor liability insurance?
Yeah, so we would name the town, and we're also going to name Ty. That was part of our agreement on that insurance.
Okay. Do you have something in writing from Ty?
We didn't do anything in writing, no.
Okay. Just didn't know if that should be something we should get, just for the file. Mr. Saltzback?
We can follow up with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yep, we can definitely write something up with him,
Sure, just,
absolutely.
okay. Chemical toilets will be brought in, okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe?
have we heard from any of the abutters? It looks like we reached out to be proactive. Have we heard from anybody?
The office has not heard from anybody. Taylor?
Okay. I am glad we reached out. I think that's a very good proactive strategy. I like that. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. And the hours were, I'm sorry, what were the hours going to be?
So we will open at noon, all 3 days. Fridays and Saturdays, it would close at 8. Sundays, it would close at 6.
Okay,
And the music end of it would end an hour before our operations closed.
Okay,
So
perfect.
4 to 7, Friday, Saturday, 2 to 5, Sunday.
perfect.
And we agreed with the town to do just acoustic only on Sundays. Keep it nice and mellow and relaxing, and
Very good. Anything further from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Uh, Where this is going to run for a long period of time, would it be okay for the town manager to, maybe at our August 9th meeting, to give us an update on how well it's going on that end of town, if there were any problems? Because they will have gone through 2 weekends, and that'd be a good time for us to know before we keep going on down through the summer. I think this is a great idea because that section of Central Street just doesn't get the business that the other end gets. And so if you can bring attention to the businesses up at that end,
yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
great. I see you're going to keep it moderate amplification, so you won't be blasting the neighbors who are behind there.
Yeah, we're not in the business of putting on big concerts, even when we have the 4 Summer Drive, because we want to create an atmosphere. So we want people to come and be able to talk and enjoy their company, and the music's just kind of there, and so.
And I was glad to see this afternoon, they were mowing all that area, cleaning making it look nice.
Yeah, we wanted to see what was underneath there, so the guys went up and did some mowing.
Yeah. Are there any butters or any neighbors in the audience who wish to speak to this? No. Seeing and hearing none, very good. Anything further? Yes, Mrs. Lapointe?
I would just like to disclose, it's a possibility that the band I am in will be playing at one of the dates, so I just want to disclose that. While the band might be paid, my husband and I actually don't take any fees anytime the band is played, so I won't be gaining anything or losing anything financially. I just want full disclosure.
Thank you very much. All right. What is the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
I move to approve the entertainment permit and 24 special one-day beer and wine licenses as presented this evening to Kalon Farm for their pop-up bull yard to be located at 270 Central Street.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the permit. Any further discussion? And permit and licenses, excuse me. Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Good luck.
Very good, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
We're excited to come to town.
July 10th, come see the band.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward,
I'd like to move for a 5-minute recess so the Finance Committee can get set up.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, 5-minute recess at 7:06. Thank you. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting back into session at 7:11. Thank you. Mr. Kane.
Now, I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order at, I guess, at 7:11. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes of June 8th. I appreciate Dr. Ward jumping in and doing the minutes for us. I'd ask if there are any, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of
All
the
right.
meeting.
Motion. Motion by Mr. Quartz and seconded by Mr. Kent. Any questions? Okay, all right. Hearing none, then I'll take a vote. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right. So we can move along to the request for transfers from the Finance Committee reserve accounts. And I think what I'd ask is Mr. Sulzbach could, speak to the three requests. There's two requests from the special reserves, and there's one request from the Finance Committee reserve. And I'll give some background, and then we'll kind of open it up to discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the time of your board as well. I provided a memo in your packet highlighting some of the requests that we're making turning into the new fiscal year. I've been working closely with my team to try to identify unbudgeted needs that weren't covered in the upcoming fiscal year 22 budget. As you're aware, my time started here well after the fiscal 22 budget was established, and so that's why these are unplanned expenses, and they are very much time sensitive. And so we're respectfully requesting that the Finance Committee dedicate funds from their reserve accounts to assist us in resolving three categories of budgetary shortfalls in particular that I'll run through really quickly for you this evening. So the first one is a Blair Square study. So as I highlight in the memo, the term Blair Square comes up 88 times in our 2014 downtown Winchendon revitalization plan. So it's something that's already been identified by our community as a priority, and yet we haven't really made any steps forward on that in the past 7 or 8 years. And so I've made it a priority to try to put something in place so that as a community we can push that forward. It has been identified as a hazard to motorists, a hazard to pedestrians, and frankly, as the way the infrastructure is laid out, it's a hindrance to commercial development along Front Street. And so it's something that unfortunately we can't really wait much longer to address. The total price tag for that project is about $2.25 to $2.5 million, which is probably part of the reason why we've put it off. I'm not asking for that tonight, so don't worry. What I am asking is to get things kicked off with a preliminary study at about $25,000. You will notice that I included as backup an estimate from a company that was offering to do the work at a higher amount. It's my belief that if I shop this around to a couple other businesses and engineers that do this line of work, that we can get a more competitive price, and that's why I'm requesting $25,000. This would include preliminary site plans, survey, and very early preliminary studies for both a roundabout option and a pass-through option. It doesn't go too far in design because I want to provide an opportunity for community input in terms of what that looks like, and I'd like to give this board an opportunity to weigh in on it as well. So really, this is just super preliminary, and it would account for about just over 1% of the total project cost start to finish when the time comes for construction. Another important piece in terms of timing is that the Central Street redevelopment is going to be going on for spring upcoming 22. And so we want to make sure that we have these preliminary pieces in hand in advance of Central Street redevelopment, and also keeping in mind that ARPA infrastructure funding is coming down from the federal government, and the state will be doling out their funds over the next 6 months or so, and we want to make sure that we have something in hand saying we're ready. If you give us the money, we're ready, and that's the purpose of this. So that's the first one. Would you like to take these one at a time to provide?
Yeah, let's take them one at a time, yeah. Questions or comments from, one of the things I'm wondering is, you pointed out that the bid from Ty and Bond was 29,000, you're asking for 25. What happens if you can't talk them down to 25?
So I will talk them down to 25. That said, if I cannot, we do have some funding that's in place in our general operating budget that we could tap into, and I'm sure Brian would be more than willing to accommodate making up that gap.
Okay, because the other thing is that the contract then, or some sort of purchase order needs to be generated before Thursday. That's correct.
That is correct, and I've laid that out for the 3 engineering firms I'm speaking with, so they know, and I've been abundantly clear that we would have to sign on to an agreement prior to rolling into the fiscal year, and that we would expect a deliverable from them no later than early September.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee?
Mr. Town Manager, so in your opinion, again, going over previous Finance Committee meeting with you, these are things you identify as needs and not wants, correct?
That is correct. These are needs, and actually it has not been identified by me. It's been identified by the community, which is an important piece for me. This isn't a unilateral decision. I'm not just walking into town deciding this is something that's a priority for the town. The town's already established this several times over the past decade or more.
Have we had any input from the police chief or the police department regarding the history of accidents at that location, as there's been an awful lot over the decades? Has the chief given any input on this?
Yes, so that's actually part of this larger conversation, and that's going to be part of this Phase 1 study, is looking at traffic counts and a history of past accidents, motor vehicle accidents.
Thank you.
You know, I think I'd just want to comment on the need for the town to fund some of this preliminary work that puts us in a position to apply for grants to move projects forward. If you recall, in the budget this year, the town voted to include $40,000 for just that purpose. We've talked a little bit about it. The request to use this money instead of that money, I think makes some sense, because if we were applying that money to this project, we'd have used it all up. So it's an opportunity where we have some reserves to address some of these needs, to get some preliminary work done for some of the projects that, as Mr. Silsbeck had pointed out, have been on the books for a long time. So I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Yep, sure.
ask a question? In the transfer request form that I had in my packet, it doesn't have an account number that the funds are going to.
You're absolutely right. I will tell you the account number.
I could speak to that, Mr. Chair. So for this, where it's a unique capital request, a specific account needs to be created by our accounting team, and one has not been created yet. So Joanne will determine an account number and official name in advance of putting pen to paper on this.
But the special reserve account does have a number.
Excuse me?
I said the special reserve account does have a number.
Oh,
Yeah,
excuse me.
That's at the top. That's at the top, but it's the money, where the money's coming out of the special reserve, but going to.
It's right, and that's what I'm saying, you're right, it does have an account number.
Sure. So the special reserve account number,
Is listed.
011.
I believe, is on there.
312-578-035. And the current balance is not $241,000 that's listed in your,
And that's an important point as well,
request.
so to address them one at a time. So the from account number is there in place. It's the 2 that is in there, 0000000-0, et cetera, because that just hasn't been formulated yet. There was an error that was caught in terms of the amount of funds that was left. That was what was told to us by our accounting office. In actuality, it didn't account for reserves that this committee had approved on March 4th, February 24th, and a second one on February 24th as well. So the actual accurate balance that has since been amended in the packet in terms of remaining balance for that account is $126,782.09. And so that figure will be reflected on your form.
What was that number again? Sorry, I couldn't hear it all.
Sure. $126,782.09.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's pre the 25,000, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's the current balance. All right, now I'll entertain a motion if there are no more questions.
No, I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of
All
the
right, this
25,000
motion,
from the special
Mr.
reserve.
Quartz. Seconded by Mr. Alexander. Any other questions or discussion? All right,
No, I think it's good that we're moving forward with a plan so we can be ready to go out to bid before any deadlines. And as the town manager just pointed out, if you don't have all your ducks in a row, you're going to fall to the bottom of the list.
very good. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Let's take the second one, the third one in the packet, which should be the second one requesting transfer from the special fund for $26,200.
Sure. So that's noted as number 3 in the memo, just for the sake of staying within the special reserve account for consistency. So that one is titled Blighted Properties Assistance. So the 2020 Community Master Plan prioritizes the improvement of, quote, blighted downtown properties and those in gateway locations. And that's as part of our effort to rebuild downtown Winchendon as a business center and rebrand it in the image of a vital New England small town. And so as part of that initiative, the town is frequently in a position to take properties by tax title, or in some instances have properties gifted to us in lieu of taxes. There is one such property that we're looking at. When that does occur, it would require a town meeting vote. We're looking at the potential of having a special coming up in late October, which is typical. There is one property which actually is here up on the screen. It's 3-11 Beach Street, where an attorney has reached out to the town over the past several years. The owner of the property moved out of state maybe a decade or more ago, and we've actually had squatters residing in this two-family, and then the garage right along the water. The courts, maybe 2 weeks ago, filed an eviction notice, so with the help of our DPW and our police, and I did notify the chair of the board in advance, the squatters were evicted. So there are significant back taxes on the property, and as you can see, the wording is blighted downtown properties and those in gateway locations. Well, this is a blighted downtown property in a gateway location, so you're killing two birds with one stone. This is actually a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the town to take control of the way it appears to people driving into downtown. It is a high-impact area, and not only is it a visual improvement, it is also a hazard right along the water that realistically doesn't necessarily say welcome to Winchendon, which is what we're trying to work on from an economic development standpoint. Now, the town is making significant improvements across the way at Forest Summer with the brewery going on, and we're very much taking control of this, but this is one piece here that we want to address. So with that backstory in mind, we are hesitant to take this property as a gift because we do not know what hazardous materials are on site. So it could be a gift and you're getting the real estate for free. However, there could be a $250,000 cleanup from hydraulic lifts spilling over time or leaching into the water, buried tires, underground tanks, things like that. And so we have a fiduciary responsibility as a town to try to scrutinize these parcels before we accept them as a gift in lieu of taxes. With that said, and if we're trying to bring this to a special in October, there is an upfront cost to do phase 1 and 2 testing on the property. Phase 1 we accomplished using fiscal 21 operating budget. Phase 2 comes out at $26,200, and that is what we're asking today so that we can carry out that Phase 2 testing throughout the summer and have the property ready for review by the people of Winchton at the town meeting coming up in late October. So it's really a logistics thing. It was an opportunity that kind of presented itself to us following the establishment of the fiscal 22 budget, and that's why we're coming and asking for this to come out of the special reserve account. Thank you.
I know you explained it. I'll blame it on the acoustics. But could you explain again the Phase 1 or Phase 2 requests? What the 26.2 is going towards the testing to get a sense as to how badly polluted that property is? Is that correct?
That is correct. So Phase 1, we've already completed. Actually, officially, we got word today it's complete, but we didn't have that word at the time of me writing this report. So it would exclusively be Phase 2, and the total price tag on that is $26,200.
Okay.
And that's top to bottom. It includes soil samples, test borings, really kind of exploratory into every aspect of the physical structures, so that if the town does accept this as a gift in lieu of taxes, we're not accepting a significant financial liability in addition to the real estate.
Questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, after the second deduction, based on the new figures we were given, that's going to leave our special reserve fund with a balance of $75,582.09. How does this work? Does this carry over into the next fiscal year? Does it go
Becomes
back?
free cash.
What's that? I couldn't hear.
It will become free cash.
It becomes free cash?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could add to that, Mr. Chair, and to your credit, I will mention that Chairman Kane and I have had several conversations about the importance of trying to leave some of this padding. We're not trying to spend down these reserves because it does roll into free cash, and that comes into play next year. I know that this past year's budget, we had to balance using a little bit of free cash. Hopefully, we're not in that situation next year, but I want to be mindful of that so that if we do need it next year, we have a little bit of that padding to fall back on. So if anybody's wondering at home why we're not trying to deplete these accounts fully down to zero, that is the reason why. So shared commitment to try to leave some type of wiggle room for unknowns coming up in the future.
Again, just a matter of note, we get a final copy of the request. From the reserve account, okay, to account number, that's going to the planning department? Is it an account in the planning department?
Correct. So this type of work traditionally has been funneled through our planning department because it's a community development initiative. So for example, we've been doing similar type of testing over at For Summer across the way. We received grant funds for hazardous materials to remove asbestos from the roof and some other brownfield issues in the property. And so that seemed like an appropriate account to steer this initiative through as well, unless the chair has another account in mind.
Well, again, I think that it's the kind of preliminary work that has to get done. If the town's going to entertain an offer to take the property, it needs to know what the liability is. Because it could be very significant liability, and it might not be in the town's interest to take the property. So I think that, from my perspective, this is work that has to be done if you're going to present a question to the town in October. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, question, can an amendment be made on the transfer request because we're asked to transfer the amount of $26,200? It makes reference to the hazardous road conditions at Blair Square, so I think it was just a copy and paste from the very first one that we approved. So I'm just wondering if we can make an amendment to actually include the street or the exact address that the work is going to be done at.
Good point.
I missed it.
He was referring to, as it's written, it refers again to Blair Square when it's actually regarding the scope of the phase of the project for these blighted properties that border protected wetlands and also could be contaminated.
You're absolutely right. Do you see that, Justin?
I do, my apologies.
That's, I figured it was a cut and paste.
New form for me, thank you.
So we just need to figure out how we want to reword this properly so everybody's on the same page.
So I would say, I mean, realistically, to just strike hazardous road conditions at Blair Square and just have it read 26-200 to address Phase 1 or Phase 2 hazard studies on blighted downtown properties. If that's agreeable.
Yeah, I think,
If I may, would it be, should you reference the property, the 3-11, or whatever, instead of saying Blair Square, reference the actual address?
Is that as it appears on the town assessor's database? Just out of curiosity.
That I don't
I
know.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
We can go through and put the appropriate parcel ID after the fact, but it's known as 3-11
Yeah.
Beach Street.
Because it protects your office, too, from somebody trying to say you didn't do it the right way.
Right.
right. So clearly the 26-2 is to address support the hazard studies in the blighted downtown area properties.
So do we include property 3-11, sir, or do we leave that out for now? That's the question, I guess, that Chuck was asking also.
Property 3-11?
Yeah, the garage, is that property 3-11, Mr. Saltzback?
Correct, so it's the garage to the left as well as the white two-family with the missing siding to the right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm sorry, if I may just, I'm looking at the proposal from the company, and they have it I beg your pardon, 1-3 and 11. So 11 would be the house, and then 1-3 would be
The commercial
Garage.
the
property.
commercial property.
Thank you.
So for consistency, then let's stick with that.
1-3 and 11
Thank
Beach
you.
Street. Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to point out, at the last Finance Committee meeting, the town manager did make sure Finance knew that he considers this all vital to attracting new business in town, to cleaning up all these blighted areas in the business district, and this is a good first step.
All right, if there's no more questions,
I'll make a motion to transfer the 26,200 from the special reserve.
all right.
Second that motion?
Motion made by Mr. Quartz and seconded by Mr. Kent. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Now we'll go back to the request from the Finance Committee Reserve Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's number 2 in the memo, Town Hall Emergency Repairs, requesting $17,500 in the reserve account. And it is worth noting, I suppose, that realistically, we probably could have found $100,000 in emergency repairs in this building, but I've only been here for 5 weeks. And a component of this is going out and getting quotes from contractors, which I'm sure any of you who own property, you know, it's like pulling teeth to try to get people to come out to kick the tires on projects around your house. It's about 10 times as worse to get them to do it on a 150-plus-year-old building. And so with that in mind, we did manage to get some projects together, and I have to give some credit as well to Kevin Cormier, our building superintendent, for helping me chase down some of these contractors and aggressively pursue quotes from 3 or more different contractors in some of these categories. What we're looking to address are significant issues that I'd referenced in the Finance Committee's previous meeting. We have a lot of historic structures in town that require a significant amount of work, and in fact, our community master plan calls on us to preserve Winchendon's existing historic and cultural assets, and it lists among that the old Murdoch, the Winchendon Community Park, Beals Memorial Library, and Town Hall. And of those properties listed, the only one that doesn't actually have a plan or any funding in place is the building we're currently sitting in. And so I felt it would be appropriate to, once again, take the beginning steps to begin to address this deficiency. And so I brought up BCA Architects out of Newton, Massachusetts, who I've worked on historic preservation projects with in the past. And they actually came up free of charge to do a preliminary assessment of the building and to help us craft a scope of work to determine what we should actually be looking for in this building. This building obviously is unique. You have the original town hall structure, you have the original firehouse that was most recently a police station, and then you have an 80s addition in between. So there's a lot of different layers there that we need to address. There's a lot of confusion among the mechanical systems because we effectively have 3 buildings tied together into one. And we have a structure that's aging at significantly different rates because they were all built around different eras, even though they're all combined. So the biggest issue that we have right now, and I broke it down into 3 pieces in terms of this request, is masonry work on the exterior of the building. So we have bricks that are actively falling out. Nothing, thankfully, to the degree of old Murdoch, but you shouldn't be able to walk up off the street and pull bricks out of the building like Jenga pieces. It's just not good for the building. And unfortunately, in addition to that, the pieces where it's loose and sagging, there's tons of gaps in the existing joints of mortar that you're inviting water and vermin into, gets behind it, freezes, ice jacks, and makes the situation worse. So it's something ideally that we probably should have been ahead of by now, but we're looking to kind of address now and get of, and that's why it's an emergency. We want to get this done before we go into next winter so that it doesn't get any worse. We're also trying to address some items that are a liability and also a little bit of a blight in and of themselves. So the wooden railings along Front Street, for example, adjacent to Cumberland Farms, are rotted to the point where you can pull it off. And all I can picture is a toddler leaning against that and falling through, 3, 4, 5 feet, depending on how tall or how high up they are up the stairs. So it's a significant financial liability in addition to the fact that the town, unfortunately, is contributing to some of the blight issues we have downtown. I don't want us to be part of the problem. We should be part of the solution. And so that's why I'm asking for that money as well. We also have a rotted railing out back, a metal railing on the 80s edition that is also a liability that needs to be addressed. It's snapped at 2 points and it's only being held on by 1. The concrete's also chipping away, so we'd like to address that. And then in addition, beyond that, roughly $10,000 in emergency repairs. We're requesting $7,500 for a top to bottom conditions assessment of this building. And so that's an important piece that I've been trying to communicate to my board, is that, we have problems in town, but the important piece is, are we doing things so that we know what the exact problems are and what they're going to cost us? So we might not have the funds in hand today to completely redo this building. We might not have them next year or the year after either. But at minimum, I feel like we should have professionals in to look at some of these problems so we know what we're really going up against. And that's the purpose of this exercise for that $7,500. So that would be everything from, the slate roof down to the granite foundation and everything in between. And we're respectfully requesting that total amount, $17,500, to come out of the reserve account from the Finance Committee that would deplete that account to 0. Thank you.
Questions? Did you also say there was sighting of wood falling off the old antique cupola on the roof?
Yes, sir, and that would probably make up the larger figure that I said realistically we could do. But given how late we are into the fiscal year, I would not be able to get a scope of work ready for that in time for the town to agree prior to the end of fiscal year 21. So it was just an unfortunate timing thing. If we had more time, I would like to address that tomorrow, but we can't, unfortunately.
So based on the height and momentum it picks up, and some may find this question silly, but it is a safety concern, are there chances of this falling from that height, bouncing off and landing on somebody? Should we cordon off an area a little bit just for public safety concern, or are we not there yet?
Not quite there yet. I think my preference would be to get a steeple jack up there with a pry bar and to remove by hand anything that's loose that can come off by hand. And I'd say that would probably take care of the immediate concern of pieces that are just falling off on their own accord. And then that's another one that the conditions assessment would cover in that top to bottom review, so that we have a probable cost for that, and that we also have a design drawn up by architects so people aren't just winging it. An important piece of the conversation that's worth mentioning that I had with this architect was, odds are, I don't foresee a situation where we'd be able to do all of the repairs that this building needs in one shot. And so I'm requesting that they try to build it in a 3, 4, or 5 phase plan. So one of that could be just the cupola, do that one summer. One of it could be doing all of the masonry on the north and south elevations, and then next year we'll get the east and west elevations. Some of it might be addressing, the rubber roof, and another year it could be addressing the mechanical systems. We're trying to find a way to design this so that, the price tag doesn't scare people off from addressing it, and then we're in a situation where, well, now we know what it costs, but we're never going to do it because it's too expensive. Kind of like Blair Square to an extent, I suppose. So we're trying to find a way to make it manageable for the people of Winchendon as well, and to also be realistic of some of the financial struggles that we have to deal with.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, that was a very long answer, but we can have somebody go up and poke around on the cupola to take down any loose pieces, just to avoid any liability in that regard as well.
I was just worried about both town employee safety and town residents going into the building.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may just interject, on that, you mentioned the cupola. A few years ago, I was speaking to a coworker, and she remembered her parents and her grandparents during World War II. They actually would have citizens scheduled to go up into that cupola and watch for enemy aircraft
Oh, wow.
from the top of this building.
Historic.
So that's very, very big part of our town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just, my question has to do with the timing again. The assessment, you've got a contract, you've got a proposal, you can certainly execute a contract in the next 2 days. The repair work, though, is, there's a scope of it, there's a number of projects you'd like to get done. I don't think you can encumber money without a specific contract or purchase order or what have you. How is that going to work out? I haven't got a problem with the 10,000, but it seems to me if it's not committed in the next 2 days, then it can't be committed.
And that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. So I've been coordinating with Joanne, our accountant, to address that exact issue. And actually, these specific projects that I brought forward are projects that I've already solicited 3 quotes for, and I actually have contractors ready to go, waiting for the approval of this committee so that they can start grinding out mortar joints tomorrow morning. So I have them lined up, and it was anybody that I couldn't get in that time frame, I'm gonna have to kick them back, and we'll do them later. But we actually have somebody lined up for the wood railings over the next 2 days, somebody lined up for the brickwork, and somebody lined up for the railing out back.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the 17,500 transfer.
All right, motion made and seconded by Ms. Alexander. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you for your support.
We'll move along to the budget account transfer requests. And we'll just kind of take them, I guess, one at a time. The first one is to transfer $2,000 from the unemployment insurance account to the software support account, it's a DP department, for $2,000. And it has to do with covering Harper's payroll increase in billing for time and attendance module. And I think right now that account has a balance of $163,996.14. Any comments? It's kind of self-explanatory. Any questions?
Nope.
All right. Hearing none, then I'd entertain a motion to make this transfer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the transfer of the $2,000 to the DP software support.
All right, motion made by Mr. Quartz,
Second that motion.
seconded by Mr. Kent. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
And Board of Selectmen, any questions on this request for transfer?
I have the question is,
Mrs. Anderson?
I see which one Chairman Kane is referring to, but we don't have them in that order.
You'll find it, okay, you're on the spreadsheet, I'm on the individual ones. So if you look at the second block down,
Yeah, no, I see exactly which one he's talking about, but
Madam Chair?
my problem is the confusion that could happen, because if we're working off electronics, and they have a piece of paper that they're turning over and saying this one's done, and we don't have that option.
There's something to be said for old school.
There is. It's just very confusing for us, and I want to make sure that we're doing it properly.
Mr. Ward?
I'm just pointing out that the first 21 transfers, the Finance Committee had already voted on, so they're voting on 22 to 32, which they haven't voted on yet. We have to vote on all of these, 32 of them
So you're
tonight.
just really adding to the confusion is what you're doing.
Outstanding.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Daigle?
if you look at the two groups that are in your Dropbox, they're all numbered. And I believe the finance committees are numbered as well. So at the top, you'll see 22. They're starting with 22 because they already approved 1 through 21.
We need to do, and this group, we both need to do. So if you tap on the second group. Yeah. The second group.
I have extra copies.
Okay.
Hand them all in for us. Danielle, do you find?
Yeah, they signed all of
I
these.
did just now,
Thank you.
We have to do.
have an extra.
That's just for the ones you can bring up.
Thanks.
I'm just going to use this,
Okay.
because it's easier.
Okay. All right. Clear as mud? Okay.
Yes.
So Board of Selectmen, do I have a motion on the transfer presented by Mr. Kane?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
Okay. So this would be number 23 on that spreadsheet. And it too is from unemployment. It's a transfer to the life insurance account to cover a shortfall, $1,075.20. And based on our last vote, the current balance of that account is $161,996.14. This would reduce that account to $160,921.12. I don't think it needs any further explanation unless anybody has questions. All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the transfer of $1,075.20.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Court, seconded by Mr. Kent,
No, actually, it was, he beat me. It was second by him, sir.
seconded by Mr. Alexander. Mr. Courts?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
And Board of Selectmen, any comments or questions on this? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to Let me rephrase them, because I didn't actually say what the motion was. I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer as requested, as presented by the FinCom.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
Thank you. Transfer request number 24 from the Department of Public Works on the water operator, from that account to the water system maintenance account. I know that the last information I had in the water operator account was $17,464. I don't know if that's an accurate number right now. So moving $15,000 to the water system maintenance is the request. Brian, I wonder if you could give us a little more information as to why we need to move that money?
The current amount was brought down to within $2,000. I made the request to move $15,000 out of some available funds to pay for some water breaks, materials, and other aspects of the water system that we're looking to get moving on and have a better understanding of what the rates are going to cost us. So some of it is to help us provide us with information so we can present to the board with what's going on.
I couldn't get the updated account numbers for, or account totals on those two, so I haven't got too much to comment on. Any other questions from the committee? All right. Then hearing none, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of $15,000 into the water system maintenance account.
Motion made by Mr. Quartz, seconded by Mr. Alexander. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Board members, any questions or comments?
If
Mrs.
I
Anderson,
might-
yes?
I'm just wondering, are we going to be having the water and sewer accounts audited?
I'm sorry, are we gonna have any water or sewer,
Accounts audited?
for what purpose?
Because I had requested it about 6 months ago, and only because the funding in these enterprise funds hasn't been audited since I've been a select board member, 6 years. They've never been audited. And you know, the accounts themselves seem to have some discrepancies.
Sure, so that's certainly something we can look into. I would just note that 6 months ago predated me. But we can look into it and try to get an answer. And also, it's worth noting that in addition to some of the water studies that we're looking to do, there is an expense associated with that was not budgeted for in fiscal '22. And so we're going to have to get creative in terms of how we execute some of these requests. I just want to set that expectation. But it's definitely something we'll explore and get numbers on and line up, and then we can find the funding when we find the funding.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? I will entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Yes.
I have so moved, seconded.
Second.
Mr. Ward, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
Request number 25 from DPW is a transfer from the DPW Assistant Director account to the DPW Highway Foreman account, $20,000. Currently, the Highway Foreman account is in arrears it's in the deficit by $12,794, the most recent report I have. So 20,000 would be, obviously put that in the black. Any other comments,
Yep, that's in arrears. At the time, previous town manager was looking at putting an assistant DPW director in play, so the money was held aside for an assistant DPW director. That didn't come to fruition, so we hired the foreman, the second foreman back rather than the assistant DPW director. So the money wasn't in the correct spot. We couldn't do an in-org transfer because of the numbers, so we had to wait till now to be able to transfer this money.
Right. Yeah, I think we knew this was coming all along.
We did.
Yep. Any other questions? Brian, all right? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of the 20,000 into the DPW highway foreman account.
All right, motion made by Mr. Quartz, seconded by Ms. Alexander. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Board members, any questions or comments? I will entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
All right. Next is a request to transfer $3,000 from the fleet maintenance account to the highway operator account. I believe that the highway operator account right now is at a balance of about $7,475. So you think you need this additional $2,000, Brian?
It'll be close. Obviously, when I asked for the transfer, we didn't know what was going to happen out in the world, so we wanted to make sure we were good. Anything that we don't use is just going to go to free cash, so.
All right. And if it isn't needed, then obviously it just goes into free cash, so that's fine. Any other questions? Brian, nope. Then I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of $3,000 from the fleet maintenance account into the highway operating account.
All right, motion, Mr. Quartz. Seconded by Mr. Alexander. Any questions? Hearing none. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Board members, any questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
All right. Question number 27, request number 27, again from Fleet Maintenance, which now has a balance of $17,160, $5,000 to the highway overtime account, which is currently in a negative of $277, no thousands.
We had a lot of windstorms this year. Windstorms can't come out of snow and ice or any other account other than highway overtime. It ate up quite a bit of it. We usually have some overtime in the spring to do crosswalk painting and other various projects that we need to do early in the morning. Again, this whole figure is not going to be spent at the time. We asked for $5,000 because we knew we had it, and whatever we don't use is going to go to free cash.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No. Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of $5,000 from the fleet maintenance account into the highway overtime account.
Second that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Quartz, seconded by Mr. Kent. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander? Aye. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe?
Excuse the ignorance in this question, but I just don't know yet.
A little bit closer to the mic.
We've had several water main breaks, so when that happens, does some of that expense come out of these highway accounts, like ripping up the road, or is that all part of the water system maintenance accounts?
Anything to do with the water break comes out of water system maintenance.
Saving the roads and stuff.
Comes out of the highway account. The highway account is strictly for highway-related incidents.
Thank you.
Transfer station.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving on to,
We have to vote.
We need, yes. All in favor, say aye.
We didn't make the motion.
I beg your pardon. I've lost track of where we are.
Could I ask a
messed you up.
question?
Yes, Mrs.
Thank you.
Anderson.
I just, a little bit of concern since the last two have been taken from fleet maintenance. This doesn't mean we're not maintaining our fleet, does it?
No, the money's coming from fleet maintenance, but it's coming from the personnel line item. The line item was open for quite a while without us being able to fill a vacancy. So, the money's transferred from personnel to personnel. I can't do it in org because your first 5 numbers are different, so it has to go through this route. So it was due to a vacancy, that's all.
Any further questions from the board? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
Good, thank you. Transfer station, request to move $300 from the transfer station maintenance account to the transfer station foreman account. And foreman account currently has a fairly healthy balance. May or may not need that $300, but right now it shows about $3,083.
We need the transfer. I did the math out to the end of the year. Previously, the transfer station foreman works at the DPW on Tuesdays and Wednesdays during the winter and the fall months. During the summer, they have extended hours, so he doesn't work the Tuesday at the DPW. He only works the Wednesday, the 8.5-hour day. The 4.5-hour day was covered out of the town's account. I didn't feel it was appropriate for the employee to be compensated at the transfer station on the extended hours, and he's compensated from the enterprise account. So I was short. I'm going to be coming next year. I didn't catch this till recently that this is the way that position was paid. So next year I'll be asking for the same transfer. It'll be a little bit more money, but it's my belief, unless the boards tell me otherwise, that if the transfer station operator is paid out of the transfer station account and not out of town funds. Does that make sense?
Kinda. Well, I noticed there were 2 line items on the monthly reports. One was for the operator, and the other one, I think the first one, which was assumed was the regular employee, is listed as...
A laborer. So there's a transfer station laborer. The transfer station laborer works 8 hours a week. They work Saturdays from 8 to 4. The transfer station foreman works Thursday, this time of year, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then Fridays from 7 to 4, and then Saturday 7 to 4. It changes in the winter, and that's when he goes up to the DPW to work his half day on Tuesday to get his hours in. And when he goes and works his half day on Tuesday, then he's compensated out of the DPW. But that doesn't happen during the summer because of the extended hours at the transfer station. So it's just keeping everything clear cut, that's all it is.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of $300 from the maintenance account to the foreman account.
Right. The motion is made by Mr. Quartz, seconded by Mr. Alexander. Mr. Quartz?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Kent?
Aye.
The chair votes aye.
Board members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Kane?
So the next 4 requests, need some clarification on. I know that the town had requested funding for new radios, I guess, for DPW, fire department, public safety, and get funded for some of it, half of it. And my understanding is that these requests would dedicate that money to the town's share of what there needs to be spent on those radios. And my personal feeling is that's not the proper way to move a capital item. I mean, this item is about a $450,000 purchase, which is a capital purchase. And it needs to go, one, before the Capital Improvement Committee, and then two, a request, I would imagine out of free cash at the October meeting, that would be a warrant article that the town would vote, as it should, on capital items. So I'm questioning whether the next four requests should even be considered.
Sure, Mr. Chair, and I do apologize. So this list was formulated in advance of the discussion that you and I had had. So actually, we are withdrawing these four. And just to add to the backstory, so basically the Robinson Broadhurst Foundation had issued a grant to us. The request was for $460,000 to upgrade the radio and communication systems for police, fire, and DPW town-wide. Robinson Broadhurst awarded half of that, so $230 in two parts. So for two phases, 115 and 115. And so in a conversation that I'd had with Chairman Kane, he had expressed pretty much what he had just expressed, and I'm in agreement that something like that, I would like to try to move forward. It is an important need, but I am also a big capital guy, and I do see the value and importance of having the opportunity for public input whenever possible. And I do feel like it would be appropriate to let this go through the Capital Improvement Committee. So after and following that conversation, I had a conversation with both our chiefs and Brian to talk about, well, what can we do with funding that we have in hand for communications and the first phase of Robinson Broadhurst infusion of grant money. So that's actually the email that's up on the screen. I apologize, the text is very small. So I went to them and said, hey, we have $172,000 in hand. What can you fill in with that hole? So at least we can phase in and get started. And then that will give us an opportunity, once we have that foundation, to come to a town meeting and go through the appropriate capital process and get that public input that Chairman Kane is requesting. So it's a long way to say we're withdrawing those final four at your request and recommendation.
Thank you.
So is this project on hold at this time, then?
So we broke it into phases, so we're working with the contractor to break it into phases. And we're going to move forward with a $157,000 recommendation, which is reflective of the first phase of $115,000 in grant funds that we have from Robinson Broadhurst, and then remaining fiscal 21 funds that can be used for that purpose for communications or smaller in-org transfers that wouldn't require these larger scale shifts in funds that Chairman Kane had advised against. So that number, I think, was 172. We're going to end up going forward with 157. 81050, to be exact.
And this is to balance out the remaining half of the 460K minus the grant?
Sorry, what was that?
Is this to part of balancing out the remaining, our half of the grant of the 460K total? I'm a little lost here, my apologies.
Oh, no, so that figure is mostly made up of the first phase of the Robinson Broadhurst grant.
Okay.
I'm always of the belief that if we know we have some type of expense coming up, I would prefer to pay it down and get it off the books as soon as possible, because all you're really doing is gifting it to yourself next year in terms of an expense. But that said, it's just timing. It was a timing thing, kind of where we are in the year. It just wasn't an appropriate time to move that much money. So what we're going to have to do, well, I would prefer to at least get half or a little more than half dealt with up front now. We're going to push it back to probably the special in October or the annual in May to provide that longer, more transparent community input opportunity through the capital plan. And it'll go to town meeting floor. And then at that point in time, we can either as a community vote to do it, the remainder all in one shot as a larger second phase, or break that second piece into a second and third phase, depending on how the town's finances look, 6 months from now when we start really digging in and building the fiscal 23 budget.
So then, as you said, resulting from that, we're going to skip those adjacent 4 that are related to this?
I'm sorry, what was that?
We're going to be skipping the 4 then that are related to this, Mr. Chair?
Correct. So, yeah, so what we have here wouldn't require these 4 at the recommendation of the chair.
I think it, one of the, just a side comment, it speaks to the need that we still have of being more coordinated as a town. We got a capital planning committee that I've been on for the last 3 years, and there's been no discussion around these radios. And it makes me wonder a little bit about the process that we use for Robinson Broadhurst. I mean, it's a wonderful resource to the town. But if it's the responsibility of the Capital Needs Committee to try to get a handle on all the town's capital needs and anticipate its future capital needs, then it would seem to me that our annual request to Robinson Broadhurst, would come in with a lot of input from the Capital Planning Committee. I mean, I'm not questioning the need for these radios. I'm not against that at all. But we have a process, and, maybe there are things out there that the Capital Planning Committee would see as ahead of the radios in terms of priority and needs. Some things that just come out of the wall, and you got to deal with them, and then there are a lot of needs that we know are out there, and we juggle as best we can. So I think that it's just a note to, as we move forward, as we consider the different funding sources for the capital plan, that we include Robinson Broadhurst, as opposed to every man kind of going for himself, every department putting in what it wants to put in. Kind of funnel that through that committee, so we're using that money wisely.
Absolutely. If I could comment to that, I'm 100% in agreement. And I think the way this one kind of came about was a little non-traditional. And I myself am as I mentioned, a big capital guy. I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite aspects of the job. And I think getting together a strong 5, 10, and 15-year capital plan so that as a community you can see these expenses as they're rolling down the line, so that when you hear radios, it's not like, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about these radios. You can say, oh, I've seen these coming down for the past 5 years, and we know that now's the time to do it. And I think that'll help us in the long term, help coordinate and prioritize some of these issues, because as Chairman Kane mentioned, some things from a capital standpoint, they just come out of nowhere, and you can't anticipate them. That's just the way it goes. But the name of the game is to try to anticipate as many issues as you possibly can, so that you can effectively put a strong financial plan together to address some of the concerns and issues you have in your community. That's the whole purpose of the capital plan exercise. So I'm very much committed over this next year and going into planning for the budget next year to get a completely revamped, strong and useful capital plan system off the ground in conjunction with the committee, so that as a community you can start planning out some of these expenses as they come down the line, rather than trying to scramble at the last second to do year-end transfers to make up the other half. That's not a great way to do business. It's not the most effective use of my time or my staff's time either. And I think at the end of the day, the community will have a better product if we focus more on long-term planning and being proactive instead of scrambling and trying to be reactive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you talk about long-term planning, we also need to remember the OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, over the next 10 to 15 years. That sliding scale takes off like a rocket ship. And this is going to be a big weight on our town's financial back, not as long from now as we'd like to believe. So that's something we also got to be thoughtful of.
Anything further for you, Mr. Kane, and your committee?
No, and I guess you all now need
Yeah,
to deal with the
we're
first
going to jump into the
21
rest of them, yes.
requests. And I hope you won't be offended if we don't sit here when you go through
No,
that.
that's fine.
So
Okay.
I'd entertain, well, I think is there any public input? Member comments? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at
Adjourn.
8:16.
Second that motion.
Second motion from Mr. Kent, his final act before he moves on. Thank you.
Second final.
Second final act, right, do have to vote.
And I would like to say that,
Adjourn.
aye.
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 I'd like to say to everybody again, for anybody in the audience or on TV watching doesn't know that Austin Saganowitz will be replacing me, and he will do an awesome job.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we will carry on. There are some budget transfer requests before the board this evening that the Finance Committee has previously reviewed and given their approval for. So now it is our turn. I think that the quickest way to get through them, I'll just read from to how much reasoning. Mr. Saltzback, if you need to add anything, or if there's any questions from the board, so we can get through these in a timely manner, if that's all right with everyone. All right, first up, we have a request to transfer from unemployment insurance to the town manager's salary in the amount of $16,500 to cover a budget shortfall. Any questions? Ms. Anderson?
I do. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna ask it, because I can't think of a tactful way to go here, but I'm gonna do it, because so many of these transfers are budget shortfalls, that people at home need to know, why is there such a budget shortfall? And of course, these are on, this is no reflection on you, and I'm really just stating this for people at home to realize that this budget was created last year. And that, because there's just a lot of critical shortfalls that it needs some explanation.
Sure, and I'd be happy to provide some. That's an excellent point. You'll frequently hear me say, for the sake of the people watching at home, because I know oftentimes we go through these things and it's second nature, but sometimes they might be kind of scratching their head and saying, well, why are we short on all these accounts? So the purpose of this is that they're unexpected year-end shortages for things that we did not anticipate when we developed the budget a year prior. Things change year over year throughout the fiscal year. For line item 1, for example, my predecessor, Mr. Hickey, left, and so what this is covering is a payout for his vacation time. It's also covering the expense for the interim, Mr. Delaney, and then it's leaving a shortfall because I'm also here now, and I also, as much as I enjoy this line of work, I don't do it for free, and so that's another component as well. So, and that's just a good example where going into developing the budget for fiscal year 21, there's no way anybody in this room would have anticipated that that's the way that would have went down. So anytime there's something that you couldn't have reasonably anticipated, that's when you start running into year-end transfers. For the sake of the people watching at home.
And I know in this particular account also, we had a couple days of overlap when Mr. Delaney came on board, and then when Mr. Saltzback came on board. But does that answer your question?
No, no, I understood why.
Right.
But every time I see budget shortfall, when people hear that at home, they approve a budget at town meeting, and that's what they understand. And when you say budget shortfall, they want to know. It sounds like we're not working within our budget, is what it sounds like to them.
not
And so we
budgeting
need to
right.
be very, very clear.
Okay.
The
Yep.
circumstances
Sure.
surrounding everything.
Thank you. Anything further on this first transfer? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We have our second request to transfer from unemployment insurance to the collector treasurer office assistant in the amount of $3,100. Reason for transfer, there was additional help in the collector treasurer's office of 80 hours from June 7th to June 30th. Any questions? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, we have unemployment from unemployment insurance to snow and ice materials in the amount of $56,680.87. Again, reason for transfer is a budget shortfall. Because snow and ice materials, we can estimate the best we can, but until the winter is over and done with, we don't know how much we actually need. Any questions on this one? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. As we go through these, Mr. Salzback, my first question, the unemployment insurance is where money for several of these transfers is coming from. Would you know why there is such an abundance of cash in the unemployment insurance?
Sure. So, and that's a good question. So there's actually three main accounts that make up a surplus, roughly about $350,000 that we're drawing off of, and the unemployment insurance is one of those. And that is a line item kind of, trying to think of the best way to word it. It fluctuates so drastically that you can't realistically predict whether it's going to go one way or another, just based off of what happens throughout the year, especially in a pandemic year in relation to unemployment. And so in that situation, you would want to deliberately err on the side of overfunding in the hope that it just gets returned to free cash instead of underfunding and then getting stuck in a position where you have 3 more months left in the fiscal year and you're at zero. So that's why.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's a very nebulous figure based on how many claims and such like that. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Our next request is from unemployment insurance to snow and, beg your pardon, we just did that one, to snow and ice overtime in the amount of $989.80. Questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a
Oh,
second?
second, sorry.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, we have from unemployment insurance to workers' compensation, the amount of $1,133 to cover a budget shortfall. Any questions? I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, we have ambulance small equipment. Is this an account that's affected by the discussion we just had about capital items?
So actually, items 6 through 21 are part of the payroll issue that was at the fire department that we actually had Eric Kinshirf come in and do a study on, where we had a grant that dropped off. And it resulted in a shortage in terms of available anticipated funding that year for that role. So
I'm sorry, can I interrupt a minute? I can't hear and understand. I think I heard grant and then from then on, sorry.
no, don't apologize. So you get too close, then it starts crackling. So there was a grant, I believe it was called the SAFER grant. Does that sound accurate? So there was a grant that we had received as a community that allowed us to expand the amount of firefighters that we had on call at any given moment. The issue was that the grant was phased in over several years, and it dropped off at a rate that was faster than anticipated. And once again, this was an issue that predated me, as a disclaimer. So we had hired an outside firm to investigate the issue to try to better understand what had happened so we can avoid doing it in the future. And basically, with the grant funds backing off, that would mean that the town would have had to increase the budget for payroll, which we did not. And so we were left in a deficit. So Chief Smith had been working with our accounting office to try to find within his own budget areas where there's remainders that he could transfer to cover that shortfall. And I believe my predecessor, Steve Delaney, had worked with the chief to rectify that prior to my arrival. So this is, what you're seeing here is the result of the work of Steve Delaney, Chief Smith, and our accounting office to try to make up for that budget shortfall. And then the second piece of that is following up and reviewing the amount that we're spending on these accounts more frequently. Because if it's something that happens 1 month, well then, okay, that could be a blip you just keep an eye on. If it happens 2 months in a row, then you need to adjust. And it seems like this is something that went on for several months and was undetected, and that's the reason why the number was kind of larger than we would typically anticipate for a budget shortfall on a salary item. And so I've been working closely with the chief to make sure we're reviewing the salaries more frequently on a monthly basis to try to head off any issues before they become bigger issues. And I apologize, that was a long answer, but it was a complex happening, so.
So,
Mrs. Anderson?
if I might, here's my concern. The bottom line is the grant was not properly budgeted. You know, we knew when we signed on, it was a 3-year grant. We were aware of that. And the budget failed to reflect that, is what the auditor found, correct?
That is correct.
So, and again, I have to look at, I commend Chief Smith for working with Mr. Delaney and working with you to try to recover for these housemen budget line item. But there are several. At what cost? Are we taking away from like the ambulance small equipment, something that we need? Is our ambulance not going to be fully functional because we took something away?
So that's a great question. So some of these accounts, there's just always going to be a little bit of a remainder. In an ideal world, you would build your budget so that at the last day of the year, your account is at 0 and then you start fresh. But realistically, there's always a little bit of a buffer because we play it conservatively. Some of these, there were capital items that were probably postponed. Things like radio repair, alarm maintenance, little things like that where they probably could have done some upgrades at the end of the year, and that's probably going to impact them a little bit next year, small amounts. But then there are other items like diesel fuel, $2,000, that, you can't predict how many calls you're going to get in any given year. So you're probably going to have some fuel left over. You're going to budget for that accordingly because you don't want to be in a situation, once again, when there's 3 months left in the fiscal year and you don't have enough money in your budget for fuel for your trucks. And so that's one where you're not really going to see that hurt kind of carry over. But I think from a capital standpoint, this is kind of a microcosm of a larger issue we have in town, putting off capital projects. All you're really doing is sticking it to the back of your future self next year. You're not really addressing the problem. So there was a little squeezing here. To Chief Smith's credit, he did work with his team to identify opportunities to try to repair rather than replace and try to postpone some of these and get as much life as he reasonably could out of some of these items. But there wasn't any sacrifices made that would result in a public safety issue or anything along those lines.
Madam Chair. Oh, go ahead.
Those guys are busy. I see those trucks going constantly. I hear them constantly because I live downtown. And, yeah, I feel, I'm just a little bit squeamish, hoping that we're taking care of them, because they do take care of us.
Absolutely, and with 2 days left in the fiscal year, that's another thing too, where it's not like there's another month left and we're kind of rolling the dice. Everything gets fully replenished in 2 days. So, you know, barring any significant event town-wide over the next 2 days, they should be in good shape.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lapointe?
I think I know the answer, I just want to make sure. So FD Hausman is just a payroll line item? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Salter?
Just have a question going forward.
The mic, I'm sorry.
Has their payroll been adjusted, their budget, so that they don't have this coming up next June?
Correct. So we have made that adjustment so that we can get ahead of it. And then the second piece is just proper financial monitoring. But we did adjust the budget, and we actually are, in addition, paying for some of the salary out of CARES because it's an allowable expense, and we did have a remainder left that we can expend up until the end of this calendar year, so the end of December. So I did authorize the chief to pay for one slot out of that, just to help spend that down too, because part of the work they're doing is still in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though we're sitting here inside without masks, it's still very much a thing outside, and the numbers are under control, but it's still something we need to address. So just trying to get creative with funding in other ways as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further on this transfer request from ambulance small equipment to FD Hausman in the amount of $4,000? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe?
Would it be inappropriate if I were to propose a motion that would be lumping number 7 through number 21 together?
Actually, we have to do them individually.
Okay, that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Certainly, you're welcome. Next up, fire department equipment to fire department houseman in the amount of $20,000 to cover budget shortfall. Any questions?
So moved.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Just say, actually, move to approve.
Move to approve.
There we go.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hold this wheel.
Chair votes aye. Next, ambulance EMT to fire department houseman in the amount of $7,000 to cover the budget shortfall. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
To approve, I didn't say it. Say move to
To
approve.
approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. I don't want anyone to think that I would not entertain a motion not to approve. So I should not suggest that the motion is for approval. It should be made by the motioner. Heating fuel to fire department houseman in the amount of $4,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next up, building repair to fire department houseman in the amount of $6,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next up, radio repair to fire department houseman in the amount of $2,500 to cover the budget shortfall.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Alarm maintenance to fire department houseman in the amount of $1,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. From fire department diesel fuel to fire department houseman, the amount of $2,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Transfer from new recruits to FD Fire Department houseman in the amount of $3,500 to cover the
Motion.
budget shortfall.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, from the dive team account to the fire department houseman, the amount of $2,500 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Next, from fire department subscriptions to fire department housemen, the amount of $2,300 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. From fire department travel to fire department housemen, the amount of $3,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. From ambulance EMT CERT to fire department overtime, the amount of $2,200 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. From ambulance computer to fire department overtime, the amount of $3,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. From ambulance office supplies to fire department overtime, the amount of $400 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. From ambulance oxygen to fire department overtime, the amount of $1,000 to cover budget shortfall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye.
It's painful.
Thank you very much for your patience with all that. All right, moving on. New business. There are a couple things here that Mr. Schultzbach has to bring to our attention. So first up, we have the Community Preservation Act presentation. Mr. Schultzbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this board may recall, in my interview, one of the things I had referenced or asked was the history of the Community Preservation Act in the community of Winchendon, and if any thought had been given towards exploring that. And so as a follow-up to that, I wanted to provide this information to the board, talk a little bit about the Community Preservation Act, what it would mean in Winchendon, what the implications would be, and what the impact would be. It is, you know, we have a lot of financial challenges in town. A lot of them come from capital and structural issues that need to be addressed, and funding is a major component of that. And for CPC, what that means is that for every, you know, dollar that Winchendon puts into the pot, the state's going to match, fluctuating but roughly 30% given year to year. And so on a project like Old Murdoch, for example, which has a $5 million price tag, the town is picking up that in its entirety. If we had CPC in place, and if we had saved for that, the state would be kicking in over $1.5 million towards that cause. And so the purpose of this presentation is it's just as info. If the board is interested in moving forward and exploring this further, or having public input sessions, or getting some type of committee together to explore it, you know, that's certainly at the board's purview. So for the Community Preservation Act, if it were implemented, there would be a 5-member Community Preservation Commission in Winchendon that by statute is made up of a member of the Conservation Commission, a member of the Planning Board, a member of the Historic Commission, a member of the Housing Authority, and a member of Recreation. And then a community as a local option is allowed to include 4 additional members should they so choose. The 3 presentations I have available are provided from Secretary Galvin's office, Secretary of State of the Commonwealth, as well as the Community Preservation Coalition. I'm going to run through those now. It's the CPA at Work in Small Towns presentation, as well as this introductory one. So, and given the late hour, I'm going to try to hustle through it a little bit, but please jump in if you have any questions. So for basics of the Community Preservation Act, it enables communities to establish a local restricted fund for historic preservation, open space and recreation, and community housing. And those are 3 areas in town that are identified in our master plan as goals to address, which is worth noting. Half the state has adopted the Community Preservation Act, a total of 176 cities and towns, and that number is actually a little higher because we just got through town meeting season. That makes up 50% of municipalities in the Commonwealth, 62% of Massachusetts residents, and so far 0 communities that have implemented it have revoked it. This is just a map showing the communities that do participate. So the green ones are active communities abutting us, Royalston and Templeton, and then the yellow ones are communities that are considering it. So it's a local surcharge. It can go up to 3% on local property tax bills. It can go as low as 0.75%. The state contribution comes from the CPA trust fund, and as I mentioned, it's an annual distribution that fluctuates. The community decides the surcharge level and which exemptions to adopt. So the important piece of this is there are mechanisms that you can implement to try to lessen the impact on lower income households in your community or lower property values. So, for example, if there was a home that was worth $120,000 in valuation, this increase would only be reflected on 20% of the value of their property. So it creates a buffer and a little bit of a safety net in that regard. You can also put that same safety net in for commercial industrial property as well. It helps protect lower income families and low to moderate income seniors, people on a fixed income. It's a very important component. The way you go about doing this is you have to either have a legislative body vote, which would be your town meeting, or collect signatures of 5% of registered voters. You would have to adopt it by ballot following that. So it's a 2-piece structure. So, as I mentioned, there's 5 kind of main pieces to a Community Preservation Commission if implemented, with those 5 seats listed, and in addition 4 additional community members. So what this committee does, and this is the important piece, is it doesn't, these funds don't just go into a slush fund. There's significant oversight, and the first layer of that oversight is your local CPC will help work to assess community needs, accept or review project proposals, get input from the public through public meetings, and then recommend their CPA projects to town meetings. So at the end of the day, the Winchendon resident still controls those purse strings, and they can determine what their priorities are in their own community using those funds. And then just some good examples of CPA funds at work. So whenever you see a CPA project going on or a CPC project, you're required to post this signage. Historic preservation throughout the Commonwealth is an allowable use. So this building, for example, Old Murdoch, Beals, any historic property you have in town. The reuse of historic buildings, of which we have many. Grants for nonprofit groups. Typically that requires a preservation easement, so there's teeth to those funds. You can kind of help control how they're dispersed. It's also good for historic preservation of documents, so not just buildings, but any type of cultural resource that you have in your community. Land protection is a big one. I know there's always concern, particularly in smaller communities, to protect agricultural land. This is one of those uses: protection of open space, land protection, any type of land that's vulnerable in terms of any development coming in, large-scale residential or commercial development. Drinking water, so if you have any aquifers or reservoirs in town. Construction of playgrounds, but not maintenance. That's an important piece. Athletic fields, so same thing. If you want to build a new turf field in town, but if your turf field's 12 years old and you weren't keeping up with the maintenance, CPC can't go back and fix it. I've run into that. Important caveat. And then hiking, biking trails, parks in general, open space and rec, community gardens, affordable housing. So these are all good, important initiatives. Pretty much checks every single box in terms of the issues that Winchendon's facing. And we'll just gone through to the end here. So the next presentation, and these are all in your packet for review, is just examples of some projects in smaller towns, and that's where you get kind of the biggest bang for your buck. And I would encourage, this is a little bit denser, but should you like to read through this on your own time, or anybody at home, we can put this on there's a CPA page already on our community development webpage. We can put these presentations on and link it right to the state if people at home have any interest in reading it. But it has some good examples of smaller communities, communities that are closer in range to us, that made good use of these funds and the important type of preservation they were able to do within their own community. And it is worth noting that in our master plan and our downtown economic revitalization plan, in terms of the resources that Winchendon has, it has the highest value in terms of trying to leverage or encourage economic development is its historic structures and its open space and recreation opportunities. And so these type of funds would protect some of your largest financial assets within your community. And lastly, and just a thank you to our assessor's office, the Secretary of State guidance is something else I would encourage you to read on your own time, just given the late hour. But this is kind of the important piece, and I think it's most important to people watching home is, so realistically, what would this mean, or what would you see in terms of any type of increase? So if you're taking into account a $100,000 residential exemption that I referenced previously, what would a 3% surcharge look like? So on an average tax bill for a median single-family home of $209,000, that would be an annual increase of about $50,000 on your tax bill.
50.
Or excuse me, $50. It's getting late. Only $50,000, folks. What that 3% translates in terms of to your coffers for those initiatives that we just listed, it would be $480,000 total, $117,000 of which would be a match from the state. So as you can imagine, you're not going to cover the full restoration of the old Murdoch in 1 year. But if you get this in place and you save it over 5 or 10 years and let these grow, you can even use these as matches, in conjunction with the Robinson Broadhurst Foundation. They're always looking for us to have some skin in the game, right? This is a pot of money you could pull from, and it wouldn't pull funding from other capital assets that you need, replacing a fire truck, paving roads. It's dedicated specifically for this cause. And then there's a whole range here, what would 2.5% look like? About $40 to your annual tax bill, about $10 quarterly. 1% would be $17, but then when you're getting to this point, you're pulling in about $160,000 setting aside, which even then is still an improvement beyond what we're currently doing. So this is a very helpful sheet. If anybody has any questions, they can obviously reach out to our office, and I'd be happy to flex some of my assistant assessor strengths from my previous life and walk people through this process. I know it's a lot of numbers, but there are ways to do it that don't have a significant impact to the taxpayer, but has a huge impact in terms of improvements to your community. So once again, if it's something the board's interested in, if you want to give it some thought anytime in the future, if you want to have public input sessions, I'd be more than happy to help you coordinate those efforts. But I just wanted to offer this strictly as information because it was referenced previously, and it would be something that would be a pretty reasonable financial solution to some of the struggles that we're going to have coming up in terms of capital issues in the next half a decade or so. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I do.
Mrs. Anderson?
I have a lot. No, I really don't. The first thing, like when you're approaching somebody, is what does this mean to me? And, if you went with the 2% surcharge and you're like roughly $35 a year. For $35 a year, you can avoid having to go vote for or against an override, is what it would cost you. And I think that's what we're looking at. So I guess my question is, but does this amount, say for instance, we don't have any capital improvements to make this year, would that money roll over to next year?
Correct, and it would continue to build, so you could let it sit for 20 years. That money wouldn't go anywhere, it would just grow and grow and grow. And you can use it not just for historic preservation, but if you're trying to bolster, for example, your SHI, the housing index in town for affordable housing, you have to hit 10% to protect yourself from large-scale residential development. You could use funds from this to help encourage development of low-income housing, to help get your community to that 10%, so you can keep, a developer from dropping 100 units on agricultural land. So that's another use as well.
Okay. And then I'm gonna use like the senior center for an example. Because if we had the CPA, and then could we also apply for grants? Because that project is so big and expensive. So can you use multiple forms of payment to essentially take the burden off the residents? long-term?
Absolutely. And this is another one of those pieces where sometimes it's easier to go for grants if you have funding in hand. So I just did one in my previous community in the town of Tingsboro for the Mass Historic Preservation Fund, and they required a 50% match. And I went to town meeting, went through the whole CPC process throughout the year, and they approved that match. So when it comes to applying for grants, you're not scrambling to find some source of funding. You know exactly where you can go to. You go through public input sessions, CPC meets 5-6 times a year, and then you bring it to town meeting floor. So the average citizen still has an opportunity to debate it, to talk about it, and to vote, ultimately in support or against it. But it is excellent leverage when you're trying to get grant funds.
Okay, and then my concern, I guess, was your timeline, that you had to have 5% of the voters' signatures by August. Because really bringing it to a ballot box, should we decide to move forward with this, it really isn't an option.
Sure, and that, I think, from the presentation is going on the assumption if you're going for a November election, but you can also do it during a local as well.
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
If you're going for like a November presidential election or a midterm, but you can hold that ballot vote during a local as well, in advance of your town meeting in May.
Okay. So if in fact this is something we want to get into place, we need to get the ball rolling.
That's really,
Yep.
that was my concern,
Yep.
going, well, I could sit at the transfer station if Brian let me, and hang out with Joshy on Saturdays, and that's where you get the voters. So, hey,
Yep.
that's where they were at. You go where they go.
I'll go out and hit the streets to get signatures.
So is
You
it
can hit the
something
street
that we
corners.
want to?
I'll go hang out at the transfer station. I mean, it could be done, but it would take some giddy up.
Mrs. Salter, 1 second. Okay.
Sorry, I'm
That's
done.
fine, okay.
Is it like, almost like an override where it's permanent?
I suppose in that you're tacking it on top of your existing levy limit, so it's a similar mechanism.
But once we make the election, is it always going to be there, or do we have, if we wanted to decide, well, no, we don't want to do this anymore, do we have that option of backing out for any reason?
You do. You would have to go through the same method, vote on it as a community and agree to remove it.
Okay.
And let's say we have,
Mrs. Lapointe?
I'm sorry, let's say we have $10 million saved up that we haven't used. If we decide to remove ourselves, we keep that funding, I assume?
That one I'd have to get a follow-up on. The state funding you would return definitively. I don't know if there'd be some type of punishment in terms of the money that directly came from us. I don't want to call it a punishment, but a deterrent. But I can follow up on that and confirm.
Yeah, I was thinking the state money, so thank you.
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, I think the message was clear at the last town meeting that the residents want us to be creative and find money. And I think, I mean, no increase for a homeowner is a small amount, but looking at, say, $50 or $30 a year, That's a real small investment for the return and the benefit for this town. So I support this completely. Now, if you know the history of the town, this came before the town meeting in 2014. It was a vote, and it was unanimously voted to bypass this. But back then, they didn't have the support. Selectmen and Finance Committee voted unanimously to not support it. So I think probably they didn't sell it well, or didn't give them all the facts, or maybe they didn't have the residential exemption. But I can't see how this is not something to strive for.
Yeah, and I think those exemptions give you that little leeway. It's not going to hit everybody the same amount or whatever. We recognize that there are certain situations, and even everybody gets the first $100,000 off their residential value. So what's the board's pleasure? Do we want to move forward with creating this commission, or what's the next step?
I think the next step is waiting on the town manager and then giving us the go-ahead to go get signatures. Because I don't think you make the commission until after you have the signatures and it's been voted on, correct?
So I think there was two routes you can go. You could either get the signatures or you could bring it, I believe, directly to town meeting. But I can confirm what the logistics would be in terms of going through that process. I just didn't want to get that far down the road without knowing that the board was supportive of exploring the option. As I mentioned in my memo, it's definitely a mechanism that I've used before in the past. When I worked for the town of Watertown, they had just passed it. And so we were implementing it when I was working in the assessor's office and working out the tax bills. When I went to Tingsboro, they already had it in place, and they had been using it to restore historic properties in their town center that have been literally rotting into the ground for decades right in the heart of their town center, and they finally got to get the funds together to restore them, and it was an excellent tool for me as a professional to have at my disposal. And then even in the only community, or my own community that I reside in, Lowell, we passed it just last year. So it's something that I know works, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily my place or something for me to push here. This has to come from the community, and it has to come from this board, and that's why I wanted to kind of take it as an option. But that's about as far as I'll take it. So if the board would like me to explore, what it would take for this board to further explore it and what steps you would have to take and what a timeline would look, I'd be more than happy to put something together so that you can put something in place to discuss it as a community. And have a good conversation about it over, at least through the summer or into the next town meeting or however the timeline shakes out. I could bring that to you at your next meeting in July, if that's agreeable.
Yeah, can I just make
Yes,
one
Mrs.
comment?
Salter.
Because I'm not going to support this, just simply because I believe, number one, now's not the time to be increasing anybody's taxes more than what's absolutely necessary. And the second part is, to me, the capital improvements that we're desperately needing aren't covered by this. We need a fire station, we need the roads worked on, and we need sidewalks that are accessible to everyone. And for me, those are my priorities, so.
Yep.
It's not the entire board supporting it.
Sure.
That's just me.
Okay. Do you want a formal motion, or?
It would be helpful,
Okay.
and I would offer that if you have a separate funding source for some of these other issues, it's freeing up funding for roads and sidewalks and a fire station.
We don't seem to have those.
I know.
No, so that's just what I'm saying, because what's going to happen is those don't seem to be available, but the work has to be done, so we're going to have to, the taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. So that's going to be added on to their 2% each year. They're going to have to pay for it, so.
Okay.
My thought.
Anyone feel like trying to put a motion together? I've kind of come up with, we move to direct the town manager to explore the next step in implementing the Community Preservation Act and report back to the board with his findings.
So moved.
Something like that? Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Was that clear enough for the minutes?
No, I can rewatch the video. I'm having
Okay.
a hard time hearing with all the fans, so.
Yeah, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
Okay, and chair votes aye, it does pass 4-1. All right. Next, Mr. Solzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another piece I wanted to bring to the committee was the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, otherwise known as ARPA. So this is the second round of COVID-related funding. So CARES was the first one. This is the second one. It's more infrastructure heavy. It's part of the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, and that was kind of doled out in two parts. So one is locally, we're getting a specific amount of funding, $3,259,579 to be exact, that's being doled out directly to the town of Winchendon. The second piece is that the Commonwealth is also getting its own significantly larger chunk from the federal government, that they have currently, past week or two, been going back and forth about how they're going to disperse that to various communities. So you may have heard that Governor Baker wanted some element of control over it. The legislature determined that they wanted entire control over it, and I think they're still ironing out those details. But that is an example of having the preliminary work for Blair Square ready in hand for the potential of getting the state's chunk of ARPA funding, possibly. What I wanted in this conversation was to get some guidance from this board in terms of what some of their priorities are in terms of using this funding. And the CLFRF guideline, which I attached to this memo, does provide some direction for the board. It leans more so towards infrastructure-related water, sewer, broadband projects as outlined. And so I've been communicating with our finance team, public safety, DPW, and planning and economic development to try to talk about the ways we can most effectively leverage these funds for the short and long term for the town of Winchendon. But I certainly didn't want to start signing off on expending any of this until the board had an opportunity to review those guidelines and to provide some feedback, and even just kind of brainstorm as a group about some ways they might like to get creative with this funding, to see how they can best serve their own community. So with that said, Madam Chair, I don't know if you have anything in mind or anybody on your board. I certainly have a laundry list of items to chip away at, but I'd love your input.
And how much was, what was the amount again, Justin?
$3,259,579, and we're going to be receiving it in two parts. So we'll get a little over $1.5 million. I filed for about 2 weeks ago, and it would hit, I anticipate, sometime in late July.
Okay. So you're looking for guidance from the board as to where we feel the town's priorities are. I'll be honest with you, the very, very first thing that jumped into my mind when I heard that amount, I think back to when we first got the water and rate study that Veolia did. And in the back of that document, it was an inventory of the wastewater treatment plant and our infrastructure and how old the pieces are and what should be done now and stuff like that. And I don't know what they came up, they had an amount to get that. And I think that, I know there's discussion about people who are on town water and sewer versus not. The bottom line is, without a town water and sewer system, the town's not good for anybody, no matter where you get your water or whatever. So this would be, in my mind, a chunk of money to invest in our water infrastructure. I know they talk about with the water shared from Ashburnham, putting in new lines from Ashburnham to bring the water in and such like that. In my mind, that would be a prime point to spend the money on.
And in response to that that does seem to be where my own mind and the mind of my staff seems to be gravitating. And even when I mentioned earlier in this meeting that we have a lot of, studies and other things they're trying to do that aren't funded, some of those could be paid for entirely or partially through this funding, so it'll help mitigate some of that cost. It is an important point that the chairwoman brought up, that even though some people are on wells and some people are on town water, that from an economic development standpoint, any commercial or industrial that's coming in town is going to be looking for town sewer or town water. That's an important piece, and one of our many goals is to help grow that commercial industrial tax base to take some of the tax burden off the back of the residential taxpayer. These are longer term goals that would take 5 or 10 years of best practices and due diligence, but it's something that we can definitely push towards, and it is definitely good timing with the significant needs that we're seeing in our water system in terms of existing infrastructure, that this funding can be used in part for that purpose. So it is something that we're exploring.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
So I wouldn't say it's a top priority. It's certainly not above water, but you said broadband. And so I don't know like the technological ins and outs of how it works, but using myself as an example, where we live in Winchendon, we're limited to Xfinity as our only option for internet provider. And I know I'm speaking for many other residents. I know some population of Winchendon has access to competitors, but I know a significant portion of Winchendon does not for whatever reason. And I don't know if there's something we can do as a municipality to work on that infrastructure so we can get competition in here, because Xfinity, if you've had them, they just hike their rates year after year and decrease their services. And look at last year when all of our families had to survive on doing online remote schooling. I do realize they did the right thing for a little while and, provided, free hotspots and whatever, but they did try to then throttle, they tried to increase, and when they got backlash, said, oh, wait, hold on, we'll wait. But it's something that is a significant need in this community, and it's not going to go away. The need for the technology isn't going to go away, and I think we all know competition, helps. So if there was some sort of infrastructure for the broadband that, we can look at. Like I said, I don't know what's involved with getting that capability for others to come in, but that pops in my mind.
Mm-hmm. And that is a good point, and I think the last year and a half or so did expose a lot of vulnerabilities, particularly in rural populations in terms of access to internet and the importance of that. And if something like the situation with COVID-19 were to happen again, we'd be better served to be more prepared for that. And I think a lot of times in terms of moving forward in the future as a community, that's probably an important infrastructure investment that's worth looking into. So we can poke around a little bit on that too. The $3.5 million, and it's worth mentioning, is going to go quick. It sounds like a lot of money, but when it comes to infrastructure, it's not a ton. But I think that's something, if we can find some low-cost ways to even encourage or incentivize private providers to extend lines or connect lines or improve their system in any way, then I think it's something worth exploring.
Thank you. Mrs. Anderson, was that a hand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, and I'm not sure, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. But during the height of the pandemic, and always hearing those ambulances going and those fire trucks going, and all I could think of is, the fire department had recently tried to go for an override because they didn't have a place to decontaminate. And all I could think of was, oh my God, we failed them and they're all going to get sick. And sure enough, some of them did. But these are the people that we rely on to keep us healthy. And I'm not sure if there's something that we could do. I guess we got them new washer and dryer. But something more substantial to keep them safe, in case something horrible like this comes down again, because they were the ones that were out there all the time. And I know I felt very, very guilty. I felt terrible.
Sure, and there is a component of the guidelines that references that the Coronavirus Relief Fund is eligible. It doesn't mention for specific infrastructure in terms of buildings, but it is for payroll expenses for public safety. as well as expenses dedicated towards responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So if it could be equipment or anything on those lines, PPE is obviously a top priority. We do have some CARES funding left, and we're going to make sure we're well stocked in that regard. But part of the reason, a large part of the reason that I brought public safety in early on in the conversation is because at the end of the day, they're very much front line on that. The purpose of ARPA is predominantly to address the economic impact that COVID-19 had, but it is very much still similar to the CARES Act component, where it's also, we're still actively addressing some of these issues. Once again, even though the numbers are a little bit under control and we're in much better shape now than we were this time last year, but that is a component. So we'll make sure we work with public safety and try to find ways to maximize how we use those funds to make sure that they're, as safe as they possibly could be in their line of duty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I'm in line with the water line to Ashburnham, I think, is key, and the broadband is key. Those are things which would really help us out in town. Also, are the schools all set up? I mean, should this pandemic come back again, are they all set now?
So I have had conversations with Thad King, and they do actually have a separate independent pot of money for the schools, and they are working to aggressively fill any gaps they might have from a technology standpoint, to make sure that all of their staff, teachers, and students are covered should we ever go into a situation where there has to be a full closure again, or you're going full remote. So they are very ahead of the game on that. And I've been working closely with them to help them try to fill in those holes.
My other concern is our seniors in town. I know during the pandemic, the senior center went above in getting out to the seniors to get food to them. Have you met with them to find out, is there any concerns they have?
Sure, and that's an excellent question. So I've actually made a point of trying to get over to our senior center once a week, even if it's for a quick cup of coffee, just to check in and make sure that their needs are being met. It's hard when your office or your building is outside of town hall. I feel like oftentimes they feel like they're on an island out there. So any department that is not immediately part of the structure, I try to get there at least once a week or every 2 weeks. That said, in terms of the Meals on Wheels programs and things like that, there may be allowable uses where we can pay for or use part of the funds to cover some of the maintenance costs of those vehicles or other equipment that they use. But I'll check in with Sheila and see if there are any other needs that they might have that we can try to get ahead of, even from a PPE standpoint, so that if we do roll into that situation again, that we can try to keep the Council on Aging open for as long as possible and to keep it as safe as possible for our senior population. So thank you.
And my final concern, we're most likely going with a hybrid meetings eventually with Zoom. And most of those meetings are going to be coming from this auditorium. The acoustics in this room are horrible, and you can't hear half of what goes on. I mean, I have hearing aids in both ears, and I've got them up max, and I still, when it comes from that side of the room, I can't hear, and you can't hear over this side. As an audience member, it's horrible. So some money needs to go into this technology to get a better acoustic system, a better audio system, so that people will come. A lot of people stay away from here because you can't hear when you're in the audience. You can hear it on TV, but not here. So we really need to do something if this is going to be where all our meetings are going to be held in a hybrid mode.
Absolutely, and we are working to try to address this space a little bit using CARES funding. That the 2 units behind me actually are a good example of that, and there are 2 more coming. Just because if we're going through a situation where space was the biggest issue, being able to space out, and then counterintuitively as a group, we're going up into the Robinson Broadhurst conference room up on the 4th floor just because it has AC and appropriate heat, because it gets way too hot in here in the summer and way too cold in the winter. It's just remarkable, given that we were doing that in the middle of a pandemic, and especially if we want to invite the public in and have them in and be able to participate. I think trying to find allowable investments in this room, in terms of mechanicals and in terms of equipment that we're using, that is definitely something that's worth looking into. So we'll work on that, as my microphone echoes at you midway through trying to address your question.
Anything further? Any other
Nope, I'm all
thoughts,
set.
comments? Okay. Did we give you enough to think about, Justin?
You gave me plenty, so.
Fix all that, please.
Yeah, I'll fix it all tomorrow. But we will get to it tomorrow and get started anyway, and get the ball rolling. And we'll check in with this group periodically. I may actually.
I'm sorry, excuse me. We're trying to see if we can turn the speakers up louder, if it makes a difference for you guys, but this is what happens when we do that, so
I
yeah.
think it's like a reverb thing. It makes it difficult to understand.
What the lapel? I wonder if the lapel.
Oh, that might be nice.
But
On my town manager report, I think what I'd like to do, for now anyway, as long as these funds exist, is include that as part of the update every meeting, something regarding ARPA or COVID-19 in general and how we're using those funds. Just also so people at home and in the community can see how those funds are being put to use in their own town. So,
perfect.
thanks.
All right, thank you. You're not off the hook yet. Extension of pandemic-related relief relative to municipal operations. Thank you for forwarding us the update from KP Law. Anything particular you want to point out on it to us, or?
It's pretty straightforward, mostly as info. There was a lot of temporary COVID-19 measures that were put in order in relation to the state of emergency, but where the state of emergency ended on June 15th, a lot of those dropped off. So the legislature kind of scrambled to do some last-minute extension on some of these, so that includes outdoor dining and alcohol to go, changes to the open meeting law, town meeting requirements, virtual notarization, housing eviction moratoriums, and then in addition, remote participation for board and committee members has been extended as well. So I know that we dropped that for about a week and a half, but now it's back. So we'll keep everybody posted if there's any changes on that, and then the rest of the document you can kind of read at your leisure.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments about this? No? All right, moving on. Board of Selectmen Town Manager Goals and Objectives discussion. Mr. Sosbach and I talked about this a week or so ago. We did not do a review at the end of last year because we knew Mr. Hickey was leaving. So we did not do a revision of the goals and objectives at that point. So the ones that the last ones that we did actually goes back to the year prior. So I think as Justin says, it's a good time let's take a look at it, set some new benchmarks, figure out what we might need to add, delete, et cetera. I went through it, and actually I made a fair number of notes. Some of it seems redundant. See if we can combine without losing any of the teeth behind it. But I guess what I'd like to ask the board to do is take a look at it between now and our next meeting. Any recommendations, any changes that you'd like, you can send them to me, to you, to me? Yeah, to Justin. And then you compile it all and come back with a new document for us to review.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there'll be some overlap among you two, so I'll do my best to break them down into reasonable categories. And my real only ask, and I mentioned that memo, is that goals should be well-defined and measurable. So make the town better is not a very useful goal. It's always our goal, but I can't go back and measure that a year later in any meaningful way. So try to make them targeted, things that are accomplishable.
Yeah, measurable
You know, a
goals.
good mix of short-term and long-term, and there's something that we can work together as a group and as a town and work towards those goals. So I appreciate your input as always, and I'll bring a couple of mine to the table as well after I review the groups, and if I see any holes from where I'm sitting, I'll gladly work to plug them, so.
Okay. So now our next meeting is July 19th. When would you want us to get to you? Any recommended changes? Let me bring up my calendar.
So I would say preferably no later than Monday, the 12th.
Okay, the week
And
prior.
I'll send a reminder email in advance of that as well, maybe on Monday, the 5th.
Okay. So any changes or recommendations by Monday, July 12th? Get to Justin. Okay. All right. Anything further on that agenda item? All right. Old business, I had requested an update on Brandywine taxes. And in your Dropbox is a note that there are some outstanding balances, if I read it correctly. Mr. Saltzback, can you speak to this?
That is correct. So at your request, I reached out to our treasurer just to take a look at what was going on with this parcel. So it's comprised of 4 separate parcels. The larger main parcel is paid in full. It was a little late, but it's up to date at $10,247.87. There are 3 smaller parcels that have outstanding taxes in the amount total of $232.31, and I've attached copies of the account balances to this memo. So they are behind a very small amount, but they are behind. So we can definitely reach out to them and see if they can settle that up for us. But a bulk of the taxes are up to date.
I just want to keep on top of it. I don't want to let it slip. Yeah.
What's that?
I just want to keep on top of it. I don't want to let it, next thing you
Absolutely.
know, we're going to turn around and we're back in a big hole. Any questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Town Manager, you are up with your Town Manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be brief. For financial updates, we're reaching the end of fiscal year '21. All departments have been closely monitoring their remaining account balances. Preliminary tax bills are set to be mailed out for July. They're due in August, and I met with our health insurance provider to hold a preliminary discussion on rates. They are contractually set to be reviewed in 2022. It was a 3-year agreement, so we're up. On the personnel end of things, our Council on Aging is hiring a part-time position. It's an 18-hour-a-week position, Monday through Friday, and would predominantly work to help lift and deliver meals to our senior population. They always need help and volunteers as well, so if anybody has free time and wants to get involved in the community, please reach out. For project updates...
Excuse me, Mr. Saltzback. Is there funding, is there an account somewhere with money to pay for this part-time position? Or is this going to be a budget issue next year?
Sure, so it would be coming out of the same pot. There's the person who originally held the roles is presently on leave, but it's unpaid because it's an hourly position. So it's just kind of backfilling until that other person is available again.
All right, thank you.
Great question. Project updates. The Winchendon Community Park Committee is set to go before the Conservation Commission at their upcoming July 8th meeting, and I've been working closely with the committee to help navigate our permitting process. Once again, I don't want to be the reason that any of our projects are getting held up, so we're helping move that along. I sat down with the architect for the Beals Library project, and we're in the early stages of establishing a timeline for that initiative. That's updating the electrical and doing some plaster work, some other smaller items. We're working with our planning and economic development team to secure $160,000 in CDBG funds, that's Community Development Block Grant, that would allow us to move forward with the water line replacement, which was an ad alternate for the Railroad Street Road reconstruction project that's ongoing. The bids came in on budget, and the water line was just an extra piece to that, so we'd like to fund that if we could while the road's open. We've established weekly meetings with the Bull Spit team to ensure the project at Fort Summer stays on track. Early pricing for remediation of the roof came in at $65,000, so we requested them to resurvey the roof. They were under the impression initially that a majority of it was asbestos-containing material. We actually got the results back for that today, and the quote was reduced from $65,000 to $19,000, so it was a significant cost savings, and it turned out a majority of the roof was not asbestos-containing. So I'm glad we did our due diligence on that, and we have some soil testing up coming down there too. And once again, that's something where the ball is in the town's court, and we're trying to get through that cleanup as quickly as we can so we can turn it over to Bull Spit so that they can start their build out, and hopefully get ready for a full-scale opening next year. DPW planners in the town manager's office met with engineers to discuss a redesign of Blair Square. This unfunded future improvement, which recently got a little influx of cash, will encourage commercial growth along Front Street and increase walkability for pedestrians.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thanks. We had a study done a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look at those?
We did, and those were very preliminary. So that was for the roundabout design, and it was done by Ty and Bond, and they came to us with a kind of rough mock-up overlay, and it was requesting a 125-foot diameter roundabout that they would try to shoehorn in between the existing limits of the sidewalk on Front Street, the Cumberland Farms development, and it would actually require a taking of that gray commercial property. And so I kind of had explained to them that the purpose of trying to redesign that intersection is it's a pedestrian safety issue, it's a motor vehicle issue, but in addition, the way the infrastructure is designed presently, it is preventing that stretch of commercial on Front Street from reaching its full potential in terms of development. And so we need to make the sidewalks deeper. We need to provide more parking, probably angled on Front Street. We need to narrow the lanes to encourage vehicular traffic to slow down as they're driving through instead of just ripping through our town center and going on to wherever they're going. Those were kind of the four main goals we had, and what was presented to us did not accomplish any of those goals, and if anything, it potentially would have made the situation worse at a $2.25 million price tag. And so that's why we're trying to kind of reboot this thing and reapproach. A small piece of the cost is the study. The larger piece of the cost is the survey. And the survey will have to do whether we do a roundabout, whether we do a stoplight intersection, a standard pass-through intersection, switch to one-ways. No matter what we do over there, we have to have a survey of existing conditions, and that's where a bulk of the cost is coming from.
Yeah, I think I'm questioning why we seem to keep throwing money at Teague and Bond. I mean, we do.
And that's an excellent question, and it's a question that I shared. So I'm actually going out and getting quotes from 2 other companies. It's a best practice anyway to get them from 3. That's why I'm pretty confident I can get under the 29,000 Ty and Bond presented, and I'm trying to get closer to 25 because I think, and don't get me wrong, Ty and Bond is filled with excellent professionals, and they do a really good job. But I think the solution that they provided, after having an opportunity to work on it for several years, it fell flat in my opinion, and that's why I'm shopping it around and trying to find something that's more cost effective that I think will result in a better outcome for the town at a lower cost is kind of the goal. So we'll see where those numbers come from, but I think it's at a point where it may be worth exploring another team taking a look at it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that study, and they tried to squish a roundabout into that area. It's just...
When I read it in our packet and I saw the sentence, preferred method or whatever it was, I went, no, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad we're pausing and rethinking and asking for, again, competition.
Did they answer your question? Okay. Thank you. Continue, please.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Continue?
Yeah, we're
Oh,
all
thank
set.
you.
Thank you.
Go get them.
Jeffrey Hausman budget.
Yeah, there we go. Always rooting for our team. As I mentioned, we have standalone AC units in here, so the important takeaway from that I want to make note of is it's in response to COVID-19 because as this room is designed, there is no air exchange. This is allowing for air exchange. It's also allowing us to use a larger space for the whole year when it's too hot, when it's too cold, rather than cramming into a smaller space. So that's an important piece. And CARES funding does allow for small-scale alterations to structures. So we did have to upgrade a little bit of electrical in order to carry those units in addition to our broadcasting equipment, and that's all covered under CARES. The Winchendon Redevelopment Authority met last Monday to discuss a number of topics, among them a potential cannabis grow facility down behind the Milek building. And so we're looking into developing an HCA with those owners, and we're currently having an appraisal done on that property just to make sure, for the sake of due diligence, that they're getting a good offer on it. And I met with members of the Toy Town Community Partnership last week to discuss the Big Toy Initiative downtown. This project intends to incorporate large-scale toy-themed public art installations throughout our town center, and I would expect to see these to start rolling out following our Central Street reconstruction. Just from a logistics standpoint, there's no point in dropping large-scale obstacles for paving equipment to work around. So we will wait until we do the infrastructure upgrade, and then we will start looking into installing some of these, and that should help just make it a little more fun, a little more vibrant downtown, to try to encourage restaurants and other businesses to make an investment down there. So keep an eye out for that. And we have encouraged them to seek public input at Fall Fest and other events so that it's really a community initiative and those decisions aren't made in a vacuum. So we'd love your input if you have any ideas. And then Senator Goby and Rep. Zlotnick were both in town at different points last week, and I took them for a walk, which is one of my favorite activities. If anyone wants to join me, down Central Street to talk about some of the projects we're working on, some of the initiatives, and to try to stress to them how much we need their partnership in terms of securing funding to get some of these things done that we're trying to do in town. So they were very receptive and very eager to be helpful. So I look forward with working alongside them for many years to come. And that is everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Saltzback? No? Thank you very much. All right. We have a few sets of minutes before us this evening for your consideration. The first set is from our regular meeting on Monday, May 24th of 2021. Any changes or corrections?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I move that we approve the minutes from Monday, May 24th, 2021.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. They are approved. Next set is Monday, August 9th.
June 14th.
All right. Well,
Did you say August 9th?
I don't know. It's not even August yet. I'm looking forward to the end of the year. I want the Fall Festival to get here. All right, let's do June 14th, 2021. Our regular meeting, but this included a joint meeting with the school committee and the town moderator.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I move we approve the minutes from Monday, June 14th, 2021.
Do I have a
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you. Chair votes aye, and Ms. Salter will abstain. So that one does pass 4-1. And next we have our executive session minutes. These are to be approved but held. We can release? Okay. For Monday, June 14th, executive session for approval and release.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I move that we approve and release the executive session minutes from Monday, June 14th, 2021.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 And one abstention. Mrs. Salter was not here, so they're approved 4-1. All right, we do have an executive session this evening. The motion is to enter an executive session under exemption 2 to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union employees and to reconvene into public session. The subject is the town accountant's contract renewal.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
I move we go into executive session number two. Wait a minute.
Second.
Thank you, made and seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Salter?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. We are in executive session at 9:36, and we will convene back to public session.